The July Landmarks Board meeting is called to order. Welcome to the July 10th, 2024 Landmarks Board meeting. It is 6:03 p.m. So the first item this evening, Marcy will review the virtual meeting decorum.
All right, thank you, Abby. The city has engaged with community members to co-create a vision for productive, meaningful, and inclusive civic conversations. This vision supports physical and emotional safety for community members, staff, and board and commission members, as well as democracy for people of all ages, identities, lived experiences, and political perspectives. More about the vision can be found on the link on the screen. And the following are examples of rules of decorum found in the Boulder Revised Code and other guidelines that support this vision. These will be upheld during this meeting. All remarks and testimony shall be limited to matters related to city business. No participant shall make threats or use other forms of intimidation against any person. Obscenities, racial epithets, and other speech and behavior that disrupts or otherwise impedes the ability to conduct the meeting are prohibited, and participants may raise their hand to speak during open comment and public comment periods during hearings. Individuals must display their whole name before being allowed to speak online, and currently only audio testimony is permitted online. And then this next slide is just one to show how to use the raise hand function. So if you are on a computer, you can find that under the reactions menu to raise your hand, or there are shortcuts, Alt-Y on a PC, Option-Y on a Mac, or *9 if you're joining from a phone.
Thank you so much, Marcy. I want to acknowledge that we do have a quorum this evening. A recording of this meeting will be available in the record archives and on YouTube within 28 days of this meeting. We'll do a really quick roll call and introductions. I'm Abby Daniels, the current chair of the Landmarks Board. Chelsea?
Chelsea Castellano, Landmarks Board member.
John?
I'm John Decker, Vice Chair of the Landmarks Board.
And Ronnie?
Ronnie Flusio, Landmarks Board member.
And Marcy, Claire, or Aubrey, I don't know if we have someone from the planning board as a liaison this evening. I don't believe I've seen Kurt join.
We do have Kurt. We're just having issues getting him promoted, but he is here in the attendees.
Okay.
And Abby, before we continue, I can confirm that Renee is not able to join this evening.
Okay, thank you. That's important. I know she was going to give it her best shot. So thank you, Marcy. So we will go ahead and proceed. We know that there are people here to participate this evening that may have strong emotions about particular projects. We want to hear from you and have found it more productive if you are speaking to persuade us rather than berating a staff or an applicant. As with regular Landmarks Board meetings, you may only speak at the appropriate time during the public hearing. Requests to speak outside of those times will be denied. We request that members of the public who wish to speak this evening will follow the normal procedures of raising your hand, the virtual hand, when we get to either public participation for items not on the agenda or one of the 3 public hearings. As board chair, I will call for a roll call vote on any motions made. The next item on our agenda is approval of meeting minutes. Does anyone have any changes or alterations to the June 5th, 2024 board meetings? Seeing or hearing none, I will move to approve those minutes. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, John. So on a motion by myself, seconded by John, we'll do a roll call vote on the June 5th meeting minutes. Chelsea?
Aye. Sorry.
Thank you, John.
Aye.
Ronnie?
Aye.
And I vote aye, so the minutes are passed.
And
And
Abby,
then
you also have to...
we have the meeting minutes, right, from the June 7th Landmarks Board Retreat. Are there any changes or alterations to those? Seeing or hearing none, I will make a motion again that we approve the Landmarks Board Retreat on June 7th meeting minutes. Chelsea? Oh, wait, I need a second. Sorry. A second,
Oh,
please.
second.
Okay, thank you, Chelsea. So on a motion by myself, seconded by Chelsea. Chelsea, you'll be the first one to vote.
Okay. Aye.
John,
Aye.
Ronnie,
Aye.
and I vote aye. So the meeting notes from the June 7th Landmarks Board retreat have been approved. We'll now turn our attention to public participation for any items not on the agenda this evening. So if you're here to speak to any of the 3 public hearings, we will allow time after both staff and applicant presentations. So this is the time to raise a virtual hand in the Zoom call. And I believe if you're on the phone, you press *9, correct? And then I'll give Aubrey a moment to see if there's any member of the public who wishes to speak to us.
All right, it looks like we have Lynn Siegel followed by Fran Sheets.
Okay.
And Lynn, I will start the timer.
You've got
for you.
two
One
public,
second.
you've got a public hearing number 1 and a public hearing number 1 again. So what gives here? I'm trying not to address what's on the public hearings. You've got 3 number 1 public hearings. It's not number 1, 2, and 3. What's going on there?
Usually it's agenda item like 5A, 5B, and 5C.
It says public hearings 1, and then it says 1, 1836 Pearl. It says 1, 2040 14th, and it says 1, 2030 11th. That would be 1, 2, and 3, right? And somebody just didn't number them right?
Yeah, so that's probably an oversight, but
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I want to talk about 1015 Juniper. And I looked at the imagery today of the internal part of that building, and I'm amazed at after we went through the inside of 1836. And I'm sorry I mentioned that. It's just for comparison to 1015 that we entered that building, and 1015 was the building that needed to be entered. It's a high-end, beautiful redo. It's incredible. There's a pond in the backyard. There's a wooden tub, you know, like a hot bath in the house. There's a sauna. There's one of the outbuildings has it all open. You can open the whole thing to the outdoors, and it has a teak ceiling, and it's just you couldn't how do you say what realtors do? They go in and make a place look nice. This looked like it was lived in, like it was beautiful things that no one could ever get to do just a showing for real estate. It's a beautiful place, and we should have seen the inside of that. It was, I'm sorry to be negative, but I have to be. And no one ever says anything back to me. It doesn't matter if I'm nice or if I'm not nice. It doesn't matter. You don't care. You just want to demolish everything. And that building should not have been demolished, not in any possible way. That is, you know, it was 21 to 2,500 square feet. Now they've got a place for 3,000 square feet. That's just horrible looking, you know, a fabricated artificial building that could go in there. And I'm curious, why didn't they put a $10 million house in? I mean, the comparison in the price is 2.2 to 2.5 million bucks. Why would you demolish something that's perfectly good? I mean, you might as well demolish a brand new house and just say, hey, we don't care. We just care what it looks like on the outside. That's a problem for Landmarks Board. You can't, I'm tired of going into houses in my area of Mapleton Hill and seeing New York City inside the house. I like the internal component of what goes into the
Lynn,
insides too.
I so apologize, but your time has expired. And I believe Fran Sheets is next.
All right, Fran, you should have the ability to talk, and I will start the timer as soon as you're able to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yes.
perfect.
Great. Hi, Landmarks Board. I find myself on the other side of the table. I just wanted to say that the big celebration in Central Park was a really big success, and a lot of people showed up. And we had tables set up to answer questions, and there were pictures, and we had specialists there, the tree guy, and all kinds of good things happening. And it was really nice. It was, however, kind of disappointing because people from the city who don't seem to understand preservation or seem to care much about it, for the most part, didn't show. We didn't have any city council members there. We did have the mayor there, but nobody else really from the city showed, and that was a real disappointment because I think people are missing out on the advantages of and the beauty of what Boulder has in terms of our landmarks. And that's all I wanted to say. Thanks. Talk to you later. I'm going to represent Historic Boulder tonight, and so I should have something on all three of those issues.
Okay, thank you, Fran. Fran, was the celebration you were referencing on July 4th?
No, it was on the 29th of June.
Oh, right. Okay,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome. Thank you.
Are there, Aubrey, do you see any other members of the public who'd like to address the board this evening?
If anyone else wishes to speak, please raise your hand now. All right, I think we're good to move on.
Okay, thank you so much, Aubrey. And as Marcy noted yesterday in an agenda meeting before tonight's meeting, there are no current or pending stays of demolition to discuss. So we are going to move right along straight into our first public hearing. This is a public hearing in consideration of the proposal to designate a portion of the property at 1836 Pearl Street as an individual historic landmark pursuant to section 91115 of the Boulder Revised Code and under the procedures prescribed by quasi-judicial hearings. Marcy, I believe you're going to be doing this, and when we get to public comment as well as the applicants, everyone will need to be sworn in this evening.
Wonderful. Thank you, Abby. This has been a long time coming, this landmark designation, and it's one that has a pretty interesting history and a pretty interesting preservation story. So without further ado, I'll get started. I'll start by going through the quasi-judicial process. All speaking to the item are sworn in, and board members note any ex parte contacts. And we'll then give a staff presentation followed by board questions, and then the applicant will have a chance to present, followed by any questions from the board. The public hearing is then opened for public comment, followed by any board questions, and then the applicant has a chance to respond to anything that was said after the last person speaks. The public hearing is then closed and the board discusses. A motion requires an affirmative vote of at least 3 members to pass, and motions must state findings, conclusions, and a recommendation. And finally, a record of the hearing is available in Central Records. The criteria for your review for this landmark designation is found in 911.5C of the Boulder Revised Code, and that's that the Landmarks Board shall determine whether the designation conforms with the purposes and standards in section 911.1 and 911.2 of the Boulder Revised Code.
Hey, Marcy, I so hate to interrupt you. Are we supposed to be seeing something on the screen?
Thank you so much for not
I
letting
don't
me
see
go
anything.
too much farther. I appreciate that. Here we are. You know what's on those earlier slides, so thanks for
Right.
fixing it before we get to the interesting things. Let me just rearrange my windows here.
And do
All
you
right,
want us to do ex parte now?
Oh, yes, please.
I have no ex parte contact other than walking by at Chelsea.
None.
John
I have none.
and Ronnie.
None.
Okay, thanks.
And an ex parte contact for both John and Ronnie would be that you attended a site visit on Monday.
That's right.
Okay. And that site visit was open to the public, and we walked around the outside of the building as well as toured the inside to see the remodeled piece there. So just adding those for the record. So the options in front of you tonight are to either recommend designation to City Council, in which case we would hold a public hearing within 100 days, or recommend disapproval for designation, and that is subject to a 45-day call-up period. This application process goes back pretty far, back to 2018, when the previous owners submitted a demolition application for the house, and that was referred to the Landmarks Board in a public hearing. On October 3rd of 2018, the board placed a stay of demolition on the application, and throughout the course of the stay explored alternatives. The Landmarks Board then voted to hold an initiation hearing to consider designating the property over the owner's objection, and the owner requested to withdraw the request to demolish the building, and instead submitted a landmark designation application and an LAC application because the result of the conversations during the stay of demolition did find a viable option to save the building. On May 6th, 2019, the Landmarks Board approved an LAC to remove an addition and relocate the building on site. And that brings us to today, July 10th, 2024, for the Landmarks Board hearing. The gap between May of 2019 and July of 2024 is a number of reasons. One being that the designation application was held in agreement with the owners until after the building was relocated, and then as well as COVID happening in there, and just some staff transitions here as we catch up on some of these backlog landmark designations. So the property is located at 1836 Pearl Street. It's located on the south side of Pearl between 18th and 19th, kind of on the East Pearl neighborhood. Here is the northwest corner of the building after its relocation. The one-story building was constructed prior to 1880, making it one of the earliest residences along Pearl Street. The vernacular masonry house features a front gable roof with half timbering at the front gable, and stucco was applied to the masonry sometime between 1922 and 1929. The front porch includes craftsman elements, including the tapered porch supports and the fieldstone base. The porch was also constructed between 1922 and 1929 and replaced an earlier full-width porch. The building has limited ornamentation, and it is simple in design. The building includes a central masonry chimney with metal coping, and the door and window openings all include segmental arches. The building's stone foundation has been parged with concrete. The building appears largely intact to its original construction. The original materials remain, including the brick, which was originally exposed, and the changes which I've covered in terms of adding that porch and covering the building in stucco in the 1920s. The building has been relocated forward on the site, and the rear frame addition, which was also added in the 20s, has been removed, and the two-story addition has been constructed at the rear of the building. The surrounding setting has changed since the house was constructed in the 1880s, as Boulder developed eastward and now includes multifamily buildings on the south side of Pearl and commercial buildings on the north side. Overall, though, the construction of the rear of the lot and the relocation of the building do not diminish the house's overall integrity, and the property retains its ability to convey its feeling of a 1880s to 1920s house and its association with the historic residence. This next slide is hopefully going to play a video. It doesn't have sound, but it's a time-lapse photo courtesy of the owner showing the house moving on site. So hopefully technology will work for us. Is it working? Good. And hopefully the owners will talk a bit about the moving process. And there's very few movers, building movers in this region, but it's pretty remarkable that this 150-year-old building was moved with 2 bobcats and a whole lot of steel into place there. And Boulder has quite a long history of moving houses. Even 100 years ago, houses would move across town, and the technology really hasn't changed too much with pump jacks and some sort of mechanism to move them either on the site or all the way across town. And then you can see that the stone porch was removed kind of in one piece. After the building moved, it was then put on place and the porch was reconstructed very carefully. So now we move to the criteria for review, which starts with the historic significance. So the property is associated with early Boulder residents Henry and Ella Harris and James and Estelle Bemis. Harris had a transfer team, and Bemis was a justice of the peace and later a janitor at CU. The Baker family lived here between 1896 and 1913. Edwin Baker was a sexton for the Presbyterian Church and lived with his daughters, Marion and Belle Baker. Marion was a Civil War widow and worked as a housekeeper, and Belle worked as a music teacher. Thelma Maydew is the property's longest resident, living here for more than 6 decades, starting in 1930 until her death at the age of 91 in 1996. Her parents, Hal and Alma Maydew, rented the house before purchasing it in 1931. Her father worked as a house carpenter and was likely the one that added the porch in the 1920s. Thelma, her mother, Alma, and sister Cuba, and as well as their cousin Clayla, all lived here and worked as laundresses, while a brother and another sister worked for an oil company. The house meets the architectural significance criteria as an example of the vernacular masonry construction with craftsman elements, evidenced through the steeply pitched gable roof, segmental arch window openings, tapered porch supports, and half timbering. The building retains a high degree of architectural integrity, and the house dates from the city of Boulder's earliest period of European settlement and is one of the few remaining 19th century houses along Pearl Street. And this photo in the bottom is remarkable. It's a photograph of a baseball game in 1887, and there is the house standing proud just on the south side of Pearl Street. And then third, the environmental significance. The property meets the environmental significance. The area has historically been a mix of commercial and residential properties, and the house is a familiar visual landmark along East Pearl. The scale and massing of the building and its overall site characteristics are compatible with its surrounding mixed-use context. I will also mention that as part of the redevelopment of the property and the decision to preserve the house, the owners were able to take advantage of modification in the MU3 zoning district to allow this to be used as housing, whereas by right it would have been commercial on the first floor in the MU3 zoning district along East Pearl Street. So it was a large number of factors that kind of helped preserve this house. So with that, staff recommends that the Landmarks Board recommend that the house be designated along with a portion of the property as a local historic landmark to be known as the Thelma Maydew House, finding that it meets the standards for individual landmark designation in the code, and adopt the staff memorandum dated July 10th, 2024 as findings of the board. The proposed name and plaque language is here on the screen. We are recommending it be named the Thelma Maydew House, and recognizing that she was the longest resident here, that she was born in Riverton, Nebraska in 1904 and came to Boulder in 1921 and was a member of the First United Methodist Church and an avid gardener. The proposed landmark boundary encompasses the house as well as the portion of the land going to the north property line, and we feel this is appropriate as it will preserve the view of the house from the public right-of-way along Pearl Street while allowing for the redevelopment of the rest of the lot. Here are the proposed findings, and a reminder that that concludes my staff presentation. We'll next follow with the applicant presentation, public participation, applicant response, and then board deliberation. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions you may have. Go back to here.
I don't see or hear any questions, and I do want to give a shout out to John and Ronnie for being able to go to that site visit on Monday. And not seeing any questions from my colleagues on the board, we invite Aaron Grant to give your presentation.
And we'll make sure Aaron's here. Yeah, there we go.
And Aaron, I will need to have you raise your hand and swear state your full name, swear to tell the board the full truth, and then your 10 minutes will commence. Later, you will have an opportunity for an additional 3 minutes if you would like after public participation.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. So if you'll start by swearing to tell us the truth, you may then begin.
Okay, so remind me what I need to repeat. I'm sorry.
Just that you swear to tell the board the full truth.
I swear to tell the board the whole truth. And is my video on or is it not? Or am I
No,
off?
you just see your name.
Aaron, if you would like your video to be on, I will promote you as a panelist officially. Just one moment.
Okay.
All right, all you'll have to do is accept. Perfect, he's coming in as a panelist.
Oh, great. Hi, Aaron.
Hi, can you see me now? Okay, great.
Yes.
I got a new iPad and I'm just trying to figure it out. So, well, thank you for taking the time, ladies and gentlemen of the Landmark and staff. I don't have anything too formal to talk about. I just wanted to express, my camp's feeling of success with this project. I think it was, there was a challenge in the beginning with the former owner, and when I came in to buy the property and came up with the idea of relocating the structure, I was pleasantly surprised at everyone's reaction, and I felt everybody was more than reasonable. And I on the property tour the other day, I mentioned the fact that sometimes these unforeseen site conditions and development, they always seem to turn out to be the most interesting piece of my projects, because you have to put so much time, effort, and thought into it, and so that is certainly the case here. So that the house, the Maydew house, really is pretty cool, a cool aspect of the property. And we've noticed some people walking by on the street and not even realizing that there's 3 brand new townhomes right behind it, which I think is a compliment. Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks. And if there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Aaron. Do any board members have questions for Aaron? Again, I don't see or hear any. So, Aaron, we're going to move on to public participation and give you another opportunity if you choose after that. So, Aubrey, I'm going to turn to you. This is the time that any member of the public should press the raise hand function in the Zoom call, or if you're joining us by phone, *9.
All right, first we have Fran Sheets. Fran, just give me one moment.
And Fran, you probably remember this well. I will need you to raise your hand and swear to tell the board the whole truth, and then your 3 minutes will commence.
Well, you can't see my hand, but I swear to tell the truth. This has been a really long project because I was on the board when we made the first visit. So it's really exciting to me to be able to see the fruition of it all. And I think that everybody did such a good job. And Historic Boulder would like me to say that they commend you for it, and that we welcome this this basically a new site, and think that you did a really good job. That's it.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Thank you, Fran. And Aubrey, anyone else indicated they'd like to speak to this?
Oh, sorry, my Zoom froze for just a moment. Can you all hear me okay?
We can.
All right. Next public comment, we have Lynn Siegel. Are we ready to move on to the next? Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry about
Yes.
that.
And Lynn, I will ask you to raise your hand and promise to tell the board the truth as you know it.
The truth as I know it, yes. Can you put on my video?
We do not allow video during public comment.
Why not?
To my knowledge, it is to be consistent with other boards and commissions.
That should be changed. Also, can you please stagger the OSBT and L Landmarks Board public comment times, because they come at the same time, and any other board meetings that happen that same night? Please coordinate between them so that I can testify at the others too, please. It's very nerve-wracking to have to jump between one and another. Now, the interior of this looks like New York City. Other than that, I think they did a great job, but I think the interior is important too. And to preserve something, or to recreate, as I know you often say, you don't want to try to recreate things to look like what they did. But I think that's very important when you have basically a New York City apartment inside of an old building that has a beautiful appeal to it. It needs to also be represented in some way on the interior. And that's all I have to say. But they did a monumental job and all of that, and I appreciate that. But you need to start considering what the inside of these buildings, the impact that they have to the many people that will be going inside of them for probably hundreds of years, because this building is made to last a long time. Done.
Thank you, Lynn. And we hear you, but you know, the Landmarks Board does not have purview over the interior of our historic resources. Aubrey, is there anyone else who's indicated they'd like to speak to this?
I don't see any other hands raised, but let's just give it a moment. All right, I think we are okay to move right along.
Okay, so we will close public hearing for this agenda item and bring it back. Now, Erin, you would have an additional 3 minutes. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, but you know, I think the board is looking forward to these deliberations. And I don't know if John or Ronnie would be able to kick it off, especially because you were able to attend the site visit earlier this week.
I can kick it off if Ronnie doesn't
Go,
want.
go for it.
I think that, first of all, this is an exciting project to have any role in. It demonstrates in a multiple set of ways what the best possible outcome of our processes can be. The fact that it started as a demo request, we set the stay. A team visited, engaged with the petitioners, and came up with solutions and ways to save the house. But I think that the level of work that went into preserving the house was exemplary. I somewhat like the interior, even though it's not our purview. It was just beautifully done. It demonstrated so many things, including how to move a house on a property with essentially 19th century technology and make it work. So it was, and I also have to compliment the developers on the projects that they built behind it, because they are done in an understated way that is somewhat unapparent from the Pearl Street side. You kind of have to know they're there and have to understand that they're on the same property. They look more like they're behind it. And it's just, it just all worked very well. It's just, I'm very happy to support this and be even the smallest part of it. So thank you.
Thanks, John. Ronnie?
Yeah, I agree. Aaron, you and your team did an excellent job. And, I think that the gesture that has been made to the community, that is the preservation of this building and the many years of opportunity for people to engage as they walk by, and for us to kind of recount this history, is a wonderful thing that you've done for the city of Boulder. I agree with John that not only at the largest scale, but at each increment, great decisions were made. And so the background nature of the new construction allows the historic building to be a foreground building. And even when, relocating a building isn't the first desire in terms of preservation, I think this is a great example of when and how it can happen, and do something that is meaningful and successful. And then to go just a little further on the details, I think that there's a lot to learn from this. I think that the building itself, the preserved building, there's quite a bit of lessons to be learned there about how to bring a building that is historic up to today's energy code, and where and how you can do it. And I was grateful to have had the opportunity to walk around and to even go down into the basement with some of my colleagues here. So, Aaron, congratulations. I congratulate you on the success story. I saw you already with your team talking to neighbors. You already created community just through the process of having worked in that neighborhood, a huge checkbox. And now you're doing it again with the large gesture to the city. So thanks for your effort. I think that it's a beautiful project, and wish you guys best of luck.
Chelsea?
Yes, great. I won't belabor the point. I think it's a great project. You have put a lot of work and effort into this, and I support staff's recommendation. Great job.
Thanks, Chelsea. And Kurt, I didn't know if you'd like to add anything on behalf of the planning board or yourself.
Sure, I will add some things. First of all, I also was able to go on the site visit, and I really appreciated that. It was a wonderful chance to see the building, the project, and I am grateful to the applicants that they were kind enough to let us go through and spend a bunch of time with us, which was great. And I totally agree with Ronnie and John that it's a great project. I'm very grateful that the building was preserved, and I think that the result is good. That all being said, landmark designation is a process that has certain criteria, right? And it's not completely clear to me that it actually meets the criteria for significance. I think in terms of historic significance, the one clear thing is that it's an old building, right? It's from 1870 something. And so that in itself is gives it a certain amount of significance. But it was not associated with any particularly important events or people in history. From an architectural standpoint, I mean, we can talk about the form, but it's actually kind of a strange amalgam of 1870 something and 1920 something, and it certainly does not have a defined an architectural style. It's really a strange hybrid of styles. Moreover, my understanding is that the front porch, which is the most prominent part, the roof structure has been completely reconstructed. There's no original material there in terms of the roof structure. And so I think it really doesn't qualify for architectural significance. And for environmental significance, the building was moved, right? Which is part of the deal. And that's great. But I think that removes what small amount of environmental significance it originally had. So I think it's a valid question whether it actually meets the criteria for designation. As I said before, I'm very grateful that the building has been preserved. I think it's a wonderful building. It's a wonderful project. I think that the applicant did a great job, but whether it should actually be a landmark, I think is a question. Thanks.
Thank you, Kurt. And it's interesting in the preservation, the city's preservation 50-year-old program, I don't think that there have ever been issues with the big, grand, stately homes or ones associated with important people throughout Boulder's history. I think it's the homes like this that tell the story of ordinary people who lived and worked and were a part of our community that are always the most vulnerable to demolition. And so I do know in the 2013 city's historic preservation plan, one of the things was called out is to look at some of the smaller dwellings and some of the smaller buildings that we could save. And this, it's almost like it became an unofficial landmark on the street. And granted, it has been moved forward a little bit, but I think it tells a story still that's important. And I think that it just adds a patina and a real grace note to the whole property. And if I were someone looking around for property, just by virtue of saving that, whether I was interested in purchasing that particular unit or one of the wonderful homes behind it, it's the fact that that's standing that tells a part of Boulder's story, that it's got something unique and special. It's got character. It has soul in it. It would make me someone really much more interested in that property. So I also think there's an added value. So I am delighted to be supporting staff's recommendation to forward this to City Council. I think kudos on that. It was great to see that video. That was really, really fun to see. So thank you so much for doing that. And I do think it makes that whole street, that whole area, I think it just gives it a character that would be gone if that building had been hauled off to the landfill. So kudos to that. And you guys, thank you all for this thoughtful conversation. That being said, I don't know if there's any board member who would like to make a motion.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion. And if you could pull up the motion, staff, I will read from it. And without a doubt for me, I am going to make the motion to recommend. And just to, before I do, this is a building that has been around for a very long time. It is a building that clearly demonstrates its original form, its subordinate massing elements, including the porch. While it was an addition, it was still a very early addition, including the aspects of the architectural character that made it more craftsman-like, are all part of the period of significance. I think that while the stucco in my mind is I think an unusual exterior material that I typically don't, think of when I think of buildings of that era. It is the material that was present during that early period, and I think it kind of modernizes the building today because of how much stucco is used in current work. The only reason I bring that up is because I think it gives a little bit of confusion to the story. But I do know that staff's report has described this very well, and I think the building has been preserved very well. And, again, I just compliment the applicant for having gone through the effort and doing such an excellent job. On that note, I move that the Landmarks Board recommend to the City Council that it designate a portion of the property at 1836 Pearl Street as a local historic landmark to be known as the Thelma Maydew House, finding that it meets the standards for individual landmark designation in sections 911-1 and 911-2 BRC 1981, and adopt the staff memorandum dated July 10th, 2024 as the findings of the board.
Thank you, Ronnie. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, John. On a motion by Ronnie, seconded by John, we'll do a roll call vote. Chelsea?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Ronnie?
Aye.
And I vote aye, so the motion passes unanimously, and Marcy will briefly go over next steps.
Thank you. So we will schedule this review by City Council. That's the first reading will be on the consent agenda, and then the second reading will be a public hearing, and that will occur before October 18th. So we will be in touch with the City Council date, and if approved, then the building is designated and the city will provide a bronze plaque and recognize your efforts, Aaron, as well as other recently designated landmarks at the Historic Preservation Award ceremony in May at Chautauqua.
Thanks again, Aaron. Now we'll move on to agenda item 5B. This is a public hearing and consideration of a landmark alteration certificate application to construct an approximately 2,000 square foot third floor addition and roof deck at 2040 14th Street in the Downtown Historic District pursuant to Section 911-18 of the Boulder Revised Code 1981 and under the procedures prescribed by Chapter 1 through 3 quasi-judicial hearings, also the Boulder Revised Code.
Thank you, Abby. Just want to check that you can see the PowerPoint. Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to go through the quasi-judicial hearing procedures. Everyone speaking to the item will be sworn in, and the board members will note any ex parte contacts. I'm going to give the staff presentation. After that, the board may ask questions. The applicant will have 10 minutes to present to the board, and the board may ask questions again. We'll then open the public hearing. After all members of the public have made comments, the applicant may respond to anything that was said. We'll then ask everyone to mute their computers while the board deliberates, and a motion requires an affirmative vote of at least 3 members to pass. A record of this hearing is available in a couple of days as a video recording, and the official record will be added to the archive within 28 days, usually sooner. So I will pass it back to Abby for ex parte context, but the board has requested that we note who has reviewed this previously, and this was reviewed at the LDRC by John and Chelsea. So back to you, Abby.
Thank you, Claire. I have no ex parte contacts for this. Chelsea?
No.
John?
None other than the LDRC.
And Ronnie?
None.
Thank you. Okay, back to you, Claire.
Okay. So the criteria for review are outlined in the Boulder Revised Code under 91118B and C. And the review is to ensure that the proposed work preserves, enhances, or restores and does not damage exterior architectural features of the property, does not adversely affect the historic architectural value of the property. The architecture, arrangement, texture, color, arrangement of color and materials are compatible with the character of the property, and that the Landmarks Board considers the economic feasibility of alternatives, incorporation of energy efficient design, and enhanced access for the disabled. The options today are for the Landmarks Board to approve the application. This is subject to a 16-day City Council call-up period, where City Council can choose to review the decision. The Landmarks Board may also deny the application, which would be subject to a 30-day period in which City Council could review the decision. This is the applicant's appeals process. However, a denial would mean that the applicant could not submit a substantially similar application within 12 months. So usually if the board is headed in that direction, they will give the applicant an opportunity to withdraw. So this is the application process so far. In November 2023, the applicant submitted a pre-application, which goes to all development review staff who can use that to identify any significant permitting or zoning code issues. And they requested additional review of the parking reduction, height modification, and variance to the setbacks for the elevator and stair towers on the east and west ends of the building, but didn't identify any other major issues. So on April 25th of this year, the applicant submitted the LAC, the Landmark Alteration Certificate application, to construct the approximately 2,000 square foot third floor addition, which has a roof deck also. On May 8th, the proposal was reviewed by the Landmarks Design Review Committee, which was Chelsea, John, and myself, and the LDRC referred the application to the Landmarks Board for a review and a public hearing to ensure that the new construction does not detract from the adjacent historic structure or the visual continuity of the historic district. Okay, so this is the property. It's located on the southeast corner of 14th and Spruce Streets within the boundary of the downtown historic district. The property is bordered by an alley to the east, right here, and the Boulder Theatre to the south. That's the orange block right there. The footprint of the two-story building encompasses the entire lot, and although this building itself doesn't contribute to the architectural variety of the district, which we'll get to in a second, it's located on a very prominent corner that includes multiple individual landmarks, including the Boulder Theatre, and also the Boulder County Courthouse, which is right here, which is actually on the National Register of Historic Places. And then there's 3 individual landmarks facing the property on the other side of Spruce Street, right here. There's the First United Methodist Church here, the Nelson Terrace, and this is the Rakowski Faust House right here. So this is the building itself. This is in the Downtown Historic District, which was added to the National Register in 1980. and designated a local historic district in 1999. It has a period of significance from 1860 to 1930. This building itself was constructed in the international style with that recognizable University of Colorado style stone facade. That's that lion's red sandstone. In 1966, it replaced an older building on this location. It has a flat roof and ribbon windows that are emphasized by those panels below. We don't know the architect, but we do know that it was developed by Boulder attorney James G. Martin, and together with a real estate broker, and was constructed by Faith Contracting Company. It's a good example of the distinctive variation to the international style that we see pretty commonly in Boulder, with that lion's red sandstone and the flat roof and the ribbon windows. It has a moderate level of integrity to the original design, including the two-story flat roof form and most of the materiality. The design was altered in 2006 by the construction of the parapet, which you can see up here. The panels below the windows have been removed on the first floor and reduced in height on the second level. And the window design with the distinctive muntins has been changed at the lower level also. And incidentally, it did receive an LAC in 2006 for that work, and it was considered a non-contributing building at that time too. So because of these changes and the date of construction outside the period of significance, we considered this to be a non-contributing building to the district and treated it that way in our analysis. Okay, so this is the proposal. It's to add a third-story flat roof addition that includes an elevated tower at the facade. We separated our analysis into key site and setting characteristics, including setback, orientation, spacing, and distance between adjacent buildings. Also the height, form, massing, size, and scale of the overall proportion of the proposed work, and key building elements, including dormers, windows, and doors, and also materials and details, including scale, proportion, texture, type, and finish. And I'm going to go through each of those individually. So first, we're going to look at the key site and setting characteristics. This includes the setback, orientation, spacing, and distance between adjacent buildings. This is the site plan with the outline of the proposed addition on the rooftop here. There are no proposed changes to the setback, orientation, spacing, or distance between adjacent buildings. There are 2 mature trees in the right-of-way that have been identified by the city forester as needing to be removed due to their condition, and they will be replaced. And if you have questions about that, that's a good question for the applicant. We also looked at mass, scale, and location of the proposed addition. So the height, form, massing, size, and scale, and overall proportion. This is the proposal from 14th Street. So this is the adjacent Boulder Theater facade right here. And this is the addition at the top of this building. This includes an elevator tower at the south side, which is set back approximately 12 feet from the roof parapet here facing 14th Street. The tower is approximately 1 story tall and about 16 feet wide. There's an elevator overrun, which is up here, and it will be approximately 16 feet above the height of the existing parapet wall. The main massing of the addition, which is this part here, is set back approximately 36 feet from the roof parapet facing 14th Street. It's about 12 feet wide at this elevation. There's a cantilevered awning that projects 17 feet from the proposed addition. It's set behind the elevator tower with a 19-foot setback from the parapet. I hope you're following all of this. The awning wraps the northwest corner of the addition, and this part here projects about 5 foot 6 inches from the north side of the addition. We do have 3D modeling, and it's a lot easier to understand it from that. So this is going around the corner. This is from Spruce Street. You can see the elevator tower on that west side. It's set back 33 feet from the parapet on this side. And then the bulk of the one-story addition is approximately 21 feet from the Spruce Street parapet side. The proposed addition is about 76 feet wide at this elevation. It spans about half the width of the existing building. And there is the cantilevered awning that projects from that main mass of the addition, set about 15 feet back from the parapet from here. There's at the rear also a rear tower that contains emergency egress stairs at the southeast corner of the building. Okay, so we looked at some key guidelines for the mass scale and location of that proposed addition. In the Downtown Historic District guidelines, the guideline asks us to consider proportioning of the height and mass to the building footprint. In general, buildings should appear similar in height, mass scale to other buildings in the historic area to maintain the historic district's visual integrity and unique character. At the same time, it is important to maintain a variety of heights. While the actual heights of buildings are of concern, the perceived heights of buildings are equally important. It goes on to say that 1-, 2-, and 3-story buildings make up the primary architectural fabric of the downtown, with taller buildings located at key intersections, and that you should consider relating the height of buildings to neighboring structures at the sidewalk edge. For new structures that are significantly taller than adjacent buildings, upper floors should be set back a minimum of 15 feet from the front facade to reduce the perceived height. The general guidelines add to that it's not appropriate to construct an addition that will detract from the overall historic character of the district by overwhelming existing buildings in mass and scale. We looked at the general design guidelines too to consider the roof deck, and the guideline specific to that says that 2nd-story roof decks and balconies are characteristic of only a few architectural styles found in Boulder, and roof decks may be compatible if located on the rear and if they are integrated into the primary structure. Any decks or balconies above the 2nd story are inappropriate unless based on historic precedent. So when we looked at this, we considered that the height and mass of the proposed addition would be appropriate because the main mass, not including the elevator tower, is set back at least 15 feet from both street-facing facades, which reduces its visual prominence. The proposal doesn't make the existing building dominant in height, mass, or scale to neighboring buildings. The elevator tower is set back only 12 feet from 14th Street and is more visually prominent, but staff considered that it was subordinate to the adjacent Boulder Theatre and therefore would not detract from the overall historic character of the district. In addition, we thought that the addition is potentially reversible. And on the roof deck, while roof decks are usually discouraged, staff thought that it was minimally visible and located in this downtown context, it would be appropriate. Okay, so next we looked at the key building elements, including the dormer, there's no dormers, including the windows and doors, and the solid to void relationship and materials and of those windows. So the proposed design is contemporary with large areas of full height windows and glass doors with minimal frames. This is the west elevation from 14th Street. You can see the proposed windows below the cantilevered awning here. This is the Spruce Street elevation with mostly full height windows and doors, except for these two horizontal sliding windows near the east end of the addition. The railing surrounding the rooftop deck includes alternating areas of solid metal planter boxes that intend to screen the mass of the addition. You can see these here and also in the 3D modeling. So the key guidelines that we pulled out for the building elements include the actually quite a lot of them. Let's go through them. The Downtown Historic District Guideline, which says to incorporate traditional building elements in new design and construction. This guideline advises careful integration of traditional facade features to reinforce patterns and visual alignments that contribute to the overall character of the district. These features may be interpreted in new and contemporary ways. The general design guidelines suggest that alterations to non-contributing buildings built in a recognizable architectural style should preserve and respect that style, and that the spacing, placement, scale, orientation, proportion, and size of window and door openings in new structures should be compatible with the surrounding buildings that contribute to the historic district while reflecting the underlying design of the new building. The building, as it's non-contributing, is designed in a recognizable style, even though it is non-contributing. It's a very, very recognizable mid-century style. And the design guidelines encourage preserving and respecting that architectural design. Staff considered that the balance of the solid massing of the addition and the elevator tower is balanced by the void of the large areas of glass and cantilever in a design that respects the style of the existing building. Okay, and finally, the materials and details, including the scale, proportion, texture, type, and finish. We looked at the proposed materials and detailing, including their scale, proportion, texture, type, and finish, and saw that the materials proposed are predominantly fiber cement for the siding, parapet trim, and metal for the roof, planter boxes, and railing, windows, and doors. The proposed colors include light gray for the siding and trim, the black for the roof, the planter boxes, railing, windows, and doors, and beige for the parapet, and black and beige for the siding at the elevator overrun. The siding at the elevator overrun is proposed to be metal set horizontally, and the wood look fiber cement siding is proposed to be installed vertically with a horizontal trim. Key guidelines for the materials and details include a few downtown historic district guidelines, including the use of traditional durable materials as the primary building material is encouraged to reflect the historic building construction and development pattern within the district. It says to choose accent materials similar in texture and scale to others in the district, select building colors appropriate to the area's historic character, select a color scheme that will visually link the building to its past as well as to others in the area. Consider colors that are compatible with the building's predominant materials. Develop a comprehensive color scheme. Consider the building as a whole as well as the details that need emphasis. Softer muted colors establish a uniform background and establish a hierarchy for the color palette with one color on similar elements such as window frames, and reserve bright colors for smaller special accents to emphasize entryways and to highlight special architectural ornamentation. The Downtown Historic District guidelines also note that exterior building lighting should be designed to enhance the overall architecture of the building, and security lighting should be designed for safety as well as nighttime appearance. The general design guidelines emphasize that new finished materials should be compatible with, but not seek to replicate original finished materials, and use materials that are similar in scale, proportion, texture, and finish to those used historically, and use authentic materials. Materials made to look like other materials, such as concrete that is scored to look like brick, are not appropriate. Okay, so in our analysis of the materials and details, we did consider the location of the Boulder Theatre, which really draws the eye upwards towards the decorative facade of the theatre, and thought that care should be taken to ensure that the detailing of the proposed addition really reflects that. We thought that vertical siding is not traditionally found in the historic district. And that the use of the composite, the cementitious wood products are identified in the guidelines as generally inappropriate. The general design guidelines, actually also the downtown guidelines, encourage the use of authentic materials. So we thought that the use of the stamped cementitious siding at the locations visible from the public right-of-way were inappropriate to the character of the district. We also noted that other rooftop additions in the district use metal siding to reflect the contemporary construction and to visually blend into the district. We thought that durable materials not made to look like other materials, such as metal or stucco, would be appropriate, and that but in general, the proposed color palette establishes a uniform background. We also noted that the exterior building lighting is not included on the proposal, but should be reviewed to ensure that the nighttime appearance of the addition doesn't distract from the appearance of the adjacent theatre. Okay, so in addition to compliance with the guidelines, the standards for issuance of a landmark alteration certificate are outlined in 911-18B of the Boulder Revised Code. And the issuance must meet the conditions of whether the proposed application preserves, enhances, or restores and not damage or destroy the exterior architectural feature of the landmark or the subject property within a historic district, whether the proposed application adversely affects the special character or special historic architectural or aesthetic interest or value of the landmark property, and if the architectural style, arrangement, texture, color, arrangement of color and materials used on existing and proposed structures compatible with the character of the landmark property. We thought that the proposed work will not damage or destroy the architectural features of the historic district, as the building is considered to be non-contributing. We also thought that the proposed addition will not adversely affect the special historic character of the district, as it is set back from the facade of the building and will not visually overwhelm the subject property or the surrounding historic buildings. Additionally, the design of the addition is complementary of the existing mid-century modern building. And we also thought that the architectural style of the proposed addition is compatible with the character of the non-contributing building if stated conditions are met to eliminate the cementitious stamped siding to imitate wood. And we thought that the texture, color, arrangement of color and materials used on existing and proposed structures are compatible with the character of the subject property and the district. And we thought that the proposal is generally consistent with the design guidelines in that it is set back from the street-facing facade, minimally visible, and does not detract from the overall historic character of the district and is reversible. So with that, staff's recommendation is to approve the application with conditions, finding that the proposal meets the standards for issuance of a landmark alteration certificate in Chapter 911-18 of the Boulder Revised Code, and is generally consistent with the general design guidelines and the Downtown Historic District guidelines, provided the stated conditions are met. And the conditions of approval, recommended conditions of approval, are to revise the siding material to a durable material traditionally found in the historic district, such as metal or stucco, and to provide details of exterior building, lighting, and analysis of visual impact of the addition to ensure that the nighttime appearance does not detract from the appearance of the adjacent theatre. And staff recommends that the Landmarks Board adopt the findings that, providing the stated conditions are met, the project will meet the standards of issuance of a landmark alteration certificate. So we've estimated that the board will need approximately 30 minutes for their deliberation. And generally, the question is whether the project meets the standards for issuance of a landmark alteration certificate, but we also provided some additional prompts to help the discussion if you need that, whether the mass, scale, location, and height of the proposed new addition and roof deck is appropriate. Does the scale, placement, and locations of the windows and door openings meet the design guidelines, and other proposed colors and materials are appropriate? So that's the end of the staff presentation. This is a reminder of the next steps in the process. The applicant and owner have up to 10 minutes to present to the board. The board may ask them questions. We'll then hear comments from any member of the public that wishes to speak. And the applicant may have additional time to address anything that is said. And then the board will deliberate. So any questions for staff before we hand it over to the applicant?
Claire, I don't see or hear any questions for you at this point. So thank you for that amazing presentation. That was so comprehensive and thorough. Thank you. Well done. And so now we'll invite back Aaron Grant, who we also met during the first hearing tonight. And Aaron, I don't know if you're the only one who is going to be speaking. I know you have an awesome team and there might be other members who are speaking. You'll have a total of 10 minutes. Everyone will need to swear to tell the board the full truth and state their full name. Aaron, even you will need to do that again. So I don't know who on the team is going to kick it off for the applicant.
Abby,
Okay.
I'll kick it off. So again, I swear to tell the truth. My name is Aaron Grant, and thanks again for the opportunity. I first off just wanted to respond to staff's proposed conditions of approval. They are absolutely acceptable. We're working currently through the revisions to the building materials. And we will certainly work with staff to identify the authentic materials referenced and look to fit in with the historic neighborhood. The other item that I would like to address is I understand that the representative owner of the Boulder Theater wrote a letter in opposition. And so I just wanted to address her comments. Cheryl, whom I've never met, but Cheryl Legari. I understand her concerns, absolutely. I disagree. I think, being that close and being above the Boulder Theater is actually quite an amenity for a residence. I know that firsthand because I lived in a loft on Ogden and Colfax in Denver for 11 years above the Ogden Theater, a theater similar with similar type shows. And she mentions that the artists load in and out of the back alley and park tour buses, which is not a quiet process. I have been around that for a long time. It's been a few years, but one show, I was at my loft one day and I was fortunate enough to see Prince get out of his bus. So, seeing the artists load and unload, is very attractive to me. And I understand there's an exit in front of the building in mass, quote unquote. I totally understand that. I mean, the residence being on the third story, I would think it would be relatively insulated from that activity. and whether or not it's suitable for residents. As I said, I think it's an amazing amenity. I've been going to the Boulder Theater myself since I was, 14 years old, 15 years old, and growing up outside of Meade and Longmont. And then I went to school in Boulder. So I'm very familiar with the Boulder Theater, and I look forward to being their neighbor. Let's see if there's anything else I'd like to address. I have my architect, he's on the line. He's here to address any technical questions that may be asked. I don't think he has anything to say during this presentation, and I'll just leave it at that. And again, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Aaron. And we'll now move on to public participation. Wait, do any board members have any questions of the applicants before we move on to public participation? Again, I don't see any raised hands or hear anyone. So we will go ahead and move on to public participation. And Aaron, as you know, we'll come back to you in a few moments. So Aubrey, I'm going to turn to you to see if anyone has raised their hand to speak to this agenda item. Or if they're calling in by phone, *9.
All right, it looks like we have 2 hands raised so far. We have Fran Mendel Sheets and then Andy Olry. Sorry for my pronunciation. Fran, I will promote you momentarily, and then I'll start the timer.
And Fran, once again, if you would be kind enough to swear to tell the board the full truth.
Oh, I swear to tell the board the full truth. In general, the Historic Boulder, speaking for Historic Boulder, supports staff's recommendations on this project and finds that this building has been modified in that the 3rd story is appropriate, especially with the setbacks. I had a few questions, and this might not be an appropriate place to bring them up, but I'll briefly put them out there, not as objections, but as purely as questions. One would be the appropriateness of that wall, basically, of the tower, that because I think it'll be very visible from the street. I think we're kidding ourselves if we think that these are not visible structures on the rooftops. And not only is it large and potentially could detract from the theater facade, but it's highly visible. And the materials, I don't understand how, and this is my personal issue, where there's other metal in the district that makes metal appropriate. And I think it's set far enough up rather than far enough back that the tower will be, it's high. And we went through this on the hill with some of the building the things that were put on top of those buildings. In a matter of fact, the theater on the hill, and they ended up being highly visible from the street. So that's just a question more than anything. And another question is that this was in past times in Boulder considered a contributing restorable building, and it might not have been. It doesn't meet the period of significance for the district, but it could have been for an individual landmark too. And it feels like it moves this building further from being restorable. And I just wonder whether there's not some kind of compensation, because technically, I think somebody could come back in a couple of years and ask to demolish it again, and say that it's not non-contributing, and because it's been changed even more. So I question how we eliminated this contributing but restorable criteria. And let's see. I think in general, it actually is a really good idea and might, for at least a period of time, save the building from demolition. because its use is going to be highly functional and highly needed.
And Fran, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but your time has elapsed. Do you want to just finish that thought?
That's okay, Abby. Thanks a lot. And we do support staff in this.
Great. Thank you, Fran. And then Andy, I believe you're next. And if you'd be kind enough to raise your hand and say you'll swear to tell the board the truth and then state your full name for the recording. And then your 3 minutes will commence.
All right. Sorry for the delay. I believe Andy is part of the applicant group, so I'm just a little confused. Are we good to proceed as normal for public comment? Hi, Chris. I see you're unmuted.
Can you hear me or not?
Oh, we can hear you now.
I solely raised my hand to let you know, one, to see if this actually functioned and worked. That was really the main reason for me raising my hand. And I apologize for doing that in any way out of order, but I didn't know, I couldn't figure out any other way to get attention. So I don't have anything to say currently, but that was it.
All right, great. Thank you.
And Aubrey, do you see any additional raised hands or members of the public calling in that would like to address this?
I do not see any other raised hands, but let's give it just a moment. All right, I don't see anyone else who would like to speak on this item. Thank you.
you. Thank you, Aubrey. So we'll officially close public participation for agenda item 5B. And Aaron, I'm just going to give you a chance if you want anything else to add for an additional 3 minutes before we return this to the board for deliberations.
I guess I'd just like to add that it's my understanding that it's one of the directives for downtown Boulder to promote residential over commercial, as I understand it. So that's I just wanted to make that point. And then my architect, Andy, has one thing to say. If he could just chime in for I'd like to defer my last minute or so to him, if that's possible.
Yes, thank you. But Andy, I am going to ask you to swear that you'll be telling the board the truth, and then you can take the remaining several minutes. Once you're unmuted.
Sorry, I sent Andy an official promotion request. He's probably just coming in.
Oh,
Andy, you should be able to use your video now if you're interested.
I don't think anybody really cares to see me, so I'm okay with that. I will try to be real brief. I just wanted to respond to a couple of comments that came up during the presentation. One of them being the choice of materials. As Aaron said, we are more than happy to work with Landmark on the choice of materials.
Sorry for interrupting, but just to keep the procedure the same.
I swear to tell the truth.
Yeah, and can you state your name for the record too?
My name is Andy Ulrey, and I swear to tell the truth. Okay.
Okay, Andy, go ahead.
Just to respond to the material question, we initially had a fair amount of stucco on the building, and through our site plan process, stucco was determined by, I'm not sure which part of the staff that is, but that was not an appropriate material, where we in fact thought it was an appropriate one with its proximity to the Boulder Theater, two with the stucco that was installed during the construction of 2006. We thought it complemented both our neighbor as well as our existing building. So if that is a material that is desired, we would need some help from Landmark to, with the other parts of Boulder staff to make that happen. The other item I did want to address was some of the metal being appropriate. Claire, the PowerPoint that I sent you earlier that showed some of the other contextual residences, I don't know if you can pull that up or not, but there are several. We went and took a lot of photographs in the Boulder Historic District of other residential rooftop projects. If you scroll to some of the latter pages, you'll see that metal that's one, the one before, and I think the one after. You can go to the next page and then the next page. Both of those are examples of metal, and I'm not sure if this is an actual contributing building or not, although I like the detailing of the existing building. It definitely seems to be built at an older time, and this may have been a rooftop residence with a metal exterior on what I believe to be a contributing building. Those are the only things that I wanted to add to some of the comments I had heard earlier, and I'm happy to answer any questions as they come up from staff during your comment time.
Okay, thank you. And the questions might come up from board members. So thank you for that, Andy. That's helpful. So we will bring it. Public participation's been closed. We've heard now again from the applicant. We will bring it back for board discussion. I know Claire mentioned that we estimated about 30 minutes for these deliberations. And thank you for those prompts, Claire. And I don't know if there's anyone who would like to kick it off this evening.
If nobody else is jumping in there, I will.
Go for it, John. Thank you.
Okay. I think that considering what is the overall style of the existing building, which is somewhat dilute international style, I think that this is a reasonably and actually wholly appropriate kind of intervention on the roof of that type. It's not uncommon, at least in some cases, the kind of original examples of this architectural style to have penthouse components on them from original construction that were done in kind of dissimilar form to the rest of the building, made lighter in the form of glass and steel. I can think of any number of examples of university buildings and similar buildings, some that were even full-blown brutalism that then broke with that on the penthouse level and went to glass and steel. It's also a form in a lot of contemporary architecture that is more reminiscent of mid-20th century commercial styles, like architects like Perkins and Will and their kind of Chicago style, and Zimmer Gunsel Fresca and others that use that same kind of break at the top. So I think also addressing it from the urban design standpoint, looking at it on the streetscape side, on the 14th Street side, I think that the way the proposed new mass gradients away from the Boulder Theater and steps back to the original street wall of the old building, and similarly does that on the 14th and Spruce Street side on the corner, I think is fairly appropriate. I'm not as troubled by some of the materiality discussion either. As I said, it's breaking with the kind of forms of the lower building, I don't think is inappropriate in this instance, especially with the setback and the gradient shaping of the mass and bringing it down. And in character with what City Council and others want to see happen with residential development in the town, I think it's also wholly appropriate as a use. It's kind of an exciting potential location. I envy Aaron if this is where he's going to live. So I think I totally support staff's recommendation and support their conditions as stated, and would even be willing to entertain a motion if it comes to that.
Okay, thank you, John. Ronnie or Chelsea?
Ronnie, you can go for it.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with John. I think that this proposal is an excellent proposal. So I agree with staff's report, their assessment of the property. I think maybe it's worth coming back to the materiality question. I recognize why it was brought up in staff's report. I don't disagree with it, but I think if we're looking to have a more robust talk about that before we move to make a motion, I'm game for having that talk. It sounds like John might be thinking differently. But I think that the proposal will not detract from any of the valuable historic characteristics of that area, including the detracting from the neighboring building. I know that there maybe was a concern about the elevator locations and their prominence, and I think that they were dealt with smartly. And then the aspects that John talked about in terms of transparency and stepping back and the gradation of the building, I think are all spot on. So, and then just to circle back to the application quality, I think that the graphics that were presented in the proposal are very helpful. And so I compliment the applicant with the clarity of their application. I think it really helps us assess what it is that is being presented. And I am in favor of approval.
Thanks, Ronnie. Chelsea?
Yeah, I agree with my colleagues. I'm in favor of approval. I think the staff did a great job with this report, and the applicant did a fantastic job with their materials. Like Ronnie said, it was really easy to project what it was going to look like in the future. I think I am convinced by what John was saying about the material and being a little bit more flexible with that. So I am open to having that conversation if it makes sense, but otherwise support the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Chelsea. So before I turn to Kurt to see if he wants to share anything, I'm very excited about this, and I've always liked the original building, and I understand its modifications over the year, but I've always thought that was a really cool building with its own beauty. And I think that when I first saw this proposal was going through the materials, and again, shout out and kudos to staff for not only a great comprehensive memorandum, but that was buttressed by Claire's great presentation. And then Aaron, your quality of materials, like Ronnie alluded to, it just makes this a lot easier for someone who's not an architect to speak to. But what really struck me when I first looked at it is how much this is going to enliven not just that building, but this intersection. I mean, it's really cool. And I will say, when I first went through it, I thought, I think there's some people working on this proposal that have looked at our design guidelines, that know our design guidelines. And I know people like Nancy Blackwood who are so familiar with those and wanting to adhere to that. So I will be supporting staff's recommendation with the few conditions that you already sound amenable and have already looked like you're exploring how to change that. I do agree that maybe Ronnie, you would be willing to facilitate this. The one thing I am interested to discuss, in regards to the materiality, is that my understanding still in any of our guidelines, as well as the Secretary of Interior standards that we follow, cementitious siding is still not something that has been updated or approved and is discouraged in those guidelines. So that's the one material I would like to, have a brief conversation about, simply because a few places I think it's been approved, but it's not really something we've addressed head on. But Ronnie, if you might be willing to get that conversation, have a brief conversation about that. I want to give Kurt an opportunity before we do that to share anything.
Thank you, and I agree largely with what other people said. I think that this is overall a great project. I think that it will be minimally visible from the street. It seemed like many of the renderings actually were from an elevated position that made it more visible in order to be able to see it. But in reality, certainly when you're next to the building, you won't see it. Even on the other side of the street, I think it will be very minimally visible. So I think that all makes it consistent with the standards and with the design guidelines. In terms of the materiality, when I was on the Landmarks Board, we struggled with this question of fiber cement siding. And our determination at that time was that it was an acceptable material. My feeling is although it's kind of inspired by wood, nobody actually mistakes fiber cement for wood or wood for fiber cement. And to me, it's a little bit like asbestos shingle siding, which was, again, sort of inspired by wood. But you look at asbestos shingle siding and you're like, that's asbestos shingle siding. You can tell it from 100 feet away, right? So, so I don't think it's a big deal, but I would not have any objection to the fiber cement siding if I were to be voting on this. Thank you.
Thanks, Kurt. And before I want to see if Ronnie will start the discussion about the materials, is because it seems like two of us are a little more interested in it. John and Chelsea seem to have shared some flexibility with that. I would be remiss that even though I had such a positive reaction to such an elegant proposal that really did seem to try to adhere to the guidelines. I do think it meets the criteria, and I think that's important, just not that I thought it was cool. I did find that it met the criteria as staff identified and called out, and agree with their findings. So, Ronnie, are you willing to discuss materials?
Sure. Claire, do you mind bringing up the image of the building? And perhaps there's you might have a slide that shows where the materials are being applied. Great. Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly how to address this, Abby, other than, I know that the intent of the material language in terms of simulated wood and simulated materials in the guidelines is purposeful. And it is really about the authenticity of the materials and the application of materials in traditional manners on buildings. And personally, and I know that we, are usually reviewing residential buildings that are exclusively residential. That's not to say that those residential buildings don't have masonry on them, because they often do. But I think that there is a more direct understanding of the ways in which those buildings and their materiality convey the construction method. I think this is pretty darn unique in that the wedding cake, like reduced footprint on the upper floor, is clearly from a contemporary time. And I think that this isn't a building that has other areas in which there are wood elements that are of the character and language of the simulated wood product that's being proposed. I don't think that it would be telling a version of a false history, which is often the case of the concerns when it comes to all of these character defining architectural elements. And so I think in this case in particular, because it is such a distinct form on a building that clearly demonstrates a very different construction technique, that for me, the application criteria of these material regulations, I don't think apply as directly as they do with their intent in our typical single family residential historic district reviews. I don't think from the public realm that people will necessarily even see this. I don't think that there is anything that anyone would be distracted from the public realm. If they could see it, that has to do with the textured nature of a pressed board, which is another it's another step removed from like the true nature of wood, because wood really doesn't have that grain. That's just a perception. It's usually flat. And so I think it has really a minimal impact on the public space and anybody's interpretation or understanding of the history of this building. And so I think in this case, I would be willing to approve it with the current proposal.
And John and Chelsea, any additional comments you'd like to make after?
Well, I can say my statement was I'm not troubled by issues of materiality in this case, was what I said. I agreed to accept staff's recommendations. However, if we loosen those, if we loosen the conditions on materiality, I have no problem with that. In terms of the specific material of cementitious board, which is yet to be resolved, where it is being proposed in a lot of cases, except on a case-by-case basis, I think that it's a material that we do need to consider more, because in terms of resilience and sustainability, it is a very resilient material that once applied is not going to require a lot of upkeep and maintenance, and is going to last a very long time. And it also has a certain amount of fire suppression quality to it. So it's a good material that we should be looking at, but not as a simulation of other materials so much, but as a material in its own right. The stuff that's being fabricated nowadays is better and easier to work with than the original stuff 10 years ago. So I think it's a material that we should, especially in a condition like this, where, as Kurt said, from the public realm, it's not going to be immediately apparent. It's up there. It is a different type of construction deliberately from the rest of the building. And so I'm totally okay with that.
Claire, will you either verbally or if there's a slide, remind me what staff's recommendation was just on materials?
Yes. Let's see. Yeah, we thought that the vertical siding was not traditional. The use of the stamped wood version of the composite siding didn't meet the guideline of using authentic materials, and thought that any durable material that was made to look like other material, that was not made to look like other material, would be more appropriate. I think that was it.
thank you. The piece I'd forgotten was the horizontal versus vertical. So thank you. I knew there was something I couldn't call up immediately. Chelsea, anything you'd like to add?
I don't think I have too much to add, just that I agree in these instances for this project, it does make sense to be more flexible. So if folks are amenable to more flexibility, that's what I would support.
Can I say one other thing, Abby, before
Please,
we
please.
move on? I think that staff made the right recommendation. Like, I'm grateful that staff made this recommendation because I think it's very clear. And so, Aaron, I'm kind of tangling you and your case up with a little bit of our process here. But I think staff's recommendation is very consistent with the guidelines, and it's consistent with our history of decision making on the board. I think that this is a topic that has come up in the past. And clearly, it's come up during Kurt's tenure on the board. And I think that this topic requires greater discussion for the reasons that we've been talking about. It's like, when is flexibility appropriate? And then how, fiber, cement, and other materials are becoming more prevalent, not just because of their availability, but maybe because of other longevity and fire related aspects of them. So I'm really grateful that staff made the recommendation that they did. And I'm sure Aaron's pretty flexible on this. It sounded like he was. And so this might be just a little bit more of an academic debate that is still worthy of the talk. But I think that we need to be careful if we do approve it as is in qualifying why it might be appropriate. Because I think when you read the guidelines directly, that staff made the right suggestion. It's very clear and consistent. But then again, we're a board that is a decision-making body, and we're looking at guidelines. And so it's not just a red light, green light. We're here to interpret. And so, I think that there could be flexibility in this case. And like I said, I just think we'd have to be very clear if we do provide it. If we don't, I don't think we would be doing any damage to the design of the applicant's design. And I think, we would have a clear reason not to. So I'm flexible on this. Abby, what are your thoughts?
So here's where I am. I'm excited, and I really find this proposal and project very compelling and look forward to when it's completed. I still agree with staff's recommendations on the materiality. I'm one vote, but I still do think for consistency and because of being in a historic district, I still would support staff's condition on that. And I assume conditions are going to come back to, whether we place conditions or this is going to come back to LDRC anyway, since it's not going to get resolved this evening what the final materials are.
Sounds good. Sounds like we're ready for a motion.
You want to make it, Chelsea?
Oh, sure. Okay, I move that the Landmarks Board adopt the staff memorandum dated July 10th, 2024 as the findings of the board and conditionally approve a landmark alteration certificate to construct an approximately 2,000 square foot third floor addition and roof deck at 2040 14th Street, a non-contributing building in the downtown historic district, as shown on plans dated January 18th, 2024, finding that the proposal meets the standards for issuance of a landmark alteration certificate in Chapter 9-11-18 BRC 1981 and is generally consistent with the Downtown Historic District guidelines and the general design guidelines for boulders, historic districts, and individual landmarks, provided the stated conditions are met. Do I have to read them?
I think so, Chelsea, in
Yeah.
particular, if you're going to modify it.
Yeah.
I don't think we are, though, are we?
My advice is that you don't need to read the conditions if you're just adopting the motion that has or adopting the staff memorandum that has the conditions. there.
Okay. Thank you for saving me. So yeah, so just as presented by staff.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, John. On a motion by Chelsea, seconded by John, we'll do a roll call vote. Chelsea,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Ronnie,
Aye.
and I vote aye, so the motion carries unanimously. Erin, you've made our job fairly easy or at least straightforward this evening, and Claire will again go over what the next steps are after this approval tonight.
Yeah, give me a second to find that. The wrong way. Okay. All right, so the City Council has up to 16 days to decide whether to review, we call it a call up, the decision. If they do not call that up, the conditions of the LAC will be reviewed by the Landmarks Design Review Committee. And then once the conditions are satisfied, the LAC will be issued. In the case that the City Council wants to review the decision, we will be in touch and let you know that that's the case. It happens sometimes, but rarely. So thank you very much for your time this evening, Erin.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Erin. We really appreciate you being here and the quality of your projects and proposals. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, John, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, this is for the next case. Before you move into that, I am going to have to recuse myself.
Okay,
And
thank
we'll leave,
you.
Yeah, I'll leave the meeting, and if Claire or Marcy can just shoot me a call when we're done,
Yeah.
I'll come in for the end of the meeting.
And it might be Aubrey. So thank you, John.
Yeah, anybody's welcome to call us.
Before we move on to agenda item 5C, I just wanted to see if anyone needed a 5-minute break. Okay, I'm not seeing an outpouring of cries for a 5-minute break. So let's go ahead and begin with agenda item 5C. This is public hearing and consideration of a landmark alteration certificate application to remove 3 historic windows, modify the opening and install 4 windows in the front dormer of the building at 2130 11th Street, a contributing property in the Mapleton Hill Historic District pursuant to section 91118 of the Boulder Revised Code 1981 and under the procedures prescribed by Chapter 1-3 quasi-judicial hearings. And Marcy, are you doing this presentation?
I am. Abby, would you like me to repeat the quasi-judicial process, or do you feel like we've covered that in the previous?
I think we've done pretty well with that. So I think we can just start with, I have no ex parte contacts other than seeing this at LDRC. Chelsea?
None for me.
John?
He's recused himself.
Oh, right. Sorry, John. He definitely. Okay. And Ronnie?
None.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so the criteria for your review of this landmark alteration certificate is found in 91118 of the Boulder Revised Code, and that is whether the proposed work preserves, enhances, or restores and does not damage or destroy exterior architectural features of the property, that the work does not adversely affect the historic architectural value of the property, that the architecture, arrangement, texture, color, arrangement of color and materials are compatible with the character of the property, and that the board considers economic feasibility of alternatives, incorporation of energy efficient design, and enhanced access for the disabled. The options in front of you this evening are to approve the application, subject to a 16-day City Council call-up period, deny the request, which is subject to a 30-day council call-up period, or provide the applicant an opportunity to withdraw the application. That's typically if the board is heading towards a denial. The application is then withdrawn and the case is closed. If the board does vote to deny the application, the applicant wouldn't be permitted to apply for the same scope of work for 1 calendar year. So this application process goes back a couple years, starting in September of 2019, when there was a previous request to alter the building, including modifying the front dormer. That was reviewed by the Landmarks Board in September of 2019. And the staff recommendation was to deny the application. The applicant chose to withdraw during the hearing. In October of 2020, so about a year later, the applicant submitted a revised design that was conditionally approved by the LDRC, and the LAC was issued once final materials were provided in April of 2021. In March of 2024, after that previous LAC had expired, in March of this year, the LDRC reviewed plans that were largely consistent with the 2021 LAC, and the LDRC approved that scope of work, finding that it was generally in alignment with the design guidelines, with the exception of the modification of the front dormer. And so that portion of the proposal was separated and referred up to the full board for review. In May, the applicant submitted a complete application for the Landmarks Board hearing this evening, July 10th. So while the majority of this proposal, this project has been reviewed and approved, since only a few of the board members saw it at the LDRC, I just wanted to put it into context and to clarify that the whole project includes the following approved scope of work: demolition of an addition at the northeast corner and construction of a new addition, modification of the attached stone garage, converting that into an addition with a second entrance, construction of second floor balconies with metal railings, addition of the carport access from the alley, an expansion of the existing rear dormer, the addition of skylights, windows, and doors at the east or rear elevation, and rehabilitation of the existing windows. And I think in the LDRC meetings and the notes, the committee kind of acknowledged the constraints of this site and provided that flexibility in approving some of these changes that that you see on the screen today. So this property is located on the east side of 11th Street between Spruce and Pine, and it's in the Mapleton Hill Historic District. It's also 1 block north of the Downtown Historic District, in a transitional area between the commercial downtown and the residential neighborhood to the north. The house is the only building on the lot, and an alley is located to the south, and a parking lot of a commercial building borders the lot to an east. The building is a 1-story craftsman-style bungalow, and the side gable roof of the house includes overhanging eaves and exposed rafter tails. The full-width front porch roof changes the pitch of the main roof only slightly, so that the front porch roof appears to extend from the main roof. The height of the porch wall creates a very narrow opening between the top of the wall and the porch roof, and due to this, the facade of the house is recessed beneath the porch, and the roof dormer becomes the dominant character-defining feature of the house. The dormer, which you can see in both photos, is clad in stucco with half timbering detailing. There are 3 3/1 double-hung windows within the dormer, and the windows are wood and appear original to the house. The windows are framed by a tapered craftsman-inspired surround, and this detailing is also used at the central slanted louver vent above the windows here. The property is considered contributing to the character of the Mapleton Hill Historic District, and the house retains a high degree of integrity to its original design and materials, including original wood windows at the facade. The tax assessor image taken around 1940 shows the dormer, including the form, pitch, and roof, and as well as its width, and the detailing of its overhanging eaves, rafter tails, trim work, and stucco, as well as the window, remain unchanged. So the current proposal is to remove the 3 historic windows, modify the opening, and install 4 windows in the front dormer. We separated our analysis into the key site and setting characteristics, including setback, orientation, spacing, and distance between the buildings, height, form, massing, size, and scale, and then key building elements, including dormers, windows, and doors, and then the materials and detailing. And this is a format we're going to use going forward into the LACs to break it into these different components. For a scope that is like this, we actually don't need to go too far into the site plan, since the site plan is changing and the mass scale and location of the dormer isn't changing. So then I will jump to the key building elements, which include dormers, windows, and doors in the solid to void relationship, as well as the materials and detailing. So as you can see on the left-hand side, that's the existing design of the dormer with the 3 existing windows. You can see that in the photograph in the top right. And then the proposal is to remove the 3 historic windows, enlarge the opening, and add 4 3/1 windows. The existing pattern is the 3/1 double hung windows with the decorative tapered trim that surrounds all 3 windows. The trim would be recreated around the new opening, and the existing windows are not proposed to be reused. While the height and width of the windows will remain consistent, the addition of 1 window necessitates enlarging the existing opening and changing the historic window pattern. The proposal to add an additional window is to provide the building to be converted into a duplex, and a fire-rated wall is required between units, which is shown to meet the dormer wall between 2 of the 4 proposed windows. And the applicant provided the floor plan as part of the application materials. We typically don't review interior plan changes, but because this exterior change is driven by a floor plan need, I think it is central to the discussion. So the proposal, as I mentioned, requires a fire-rated wall between units, which is shown to bisect the building, and then it jogs within the dormer to meet what would be the new window opening in the dormer. And information on why the fire-rated wall could not be located if it can jog between the existing windows was not provided in the application materials. So we look at the key design guidelines for the building elements, and the Mapleton Hill Historic District guidelines state that the window opening itself should be carefully preserved. It should not be made larger or smaller to accommodate a different sized window. It continues that preserve original window locations, do not move windows from their historic placement. And if through the window and door application survey, it is determined that the window may be replaced, the window opening itself should be carefully preserved. It should not be made larger or smaller to accommodate a differently sized window. Moving then to materials and detailing. The materials proposed to the new windows are wood with a 3/1 pattern and double hung operation and simulated wood divided lights. The finish is proposed to match the existing, which is a medium brown paint, and the trim would be recreated, though the materiality wasn't specified in the application. The general design guidelines put a great emphasis on windows, particularly at the front of a building. And so it reads, the location of the windows proposed for replacement is important in assessing their significance to a historic building. In general, the more important the elevation where the window is located, the less likely that retrofit or replacement will be appropriate. Elevations will be categorized as primary, secondary, or tertiary, using the methodology set out in the window and door replacement survey. Replacement of intact historic windows on primary elevations is rarely appropriate. And as this is the facade of the building, this is a primary facade. The design guidelines continue that snap-in Mullions or other unauthentic architectural details are generally not appropriate in the historic district. And retain and preserve existing historic windows, including their functional and decorative features, such as frames, glass, sashes, muntins, sills, heads, molding, surrounds, and hardware. Because windows are near the facade are particularly critical to the character of historic buildings, their protection may supersede the protection of historic windows elsewhere. So in addition to the design guidelines, both the general design guidelines and the Mapleton Hill design guidelines, the criteria for review is also the code criteria found in 911-18. And so we'll go through those. Does the proposed application preserve, enhance, or restore and not damage or destroy the exterior architectural features of the landmark or subject property within a historic district? And staff considers that the proposed work does destroy exterior architectural features of the contributing building by removing 3 historic windows and modifying the original window pattern on the facade. Due to the prominence of the changes to character defining features on the facade of a contributing building, the proposed work will adversely affect the historic character of the property. And staff considers that the proposed architectural style, arrangement, texture, color, and materials are not compatible with the historic character of the property, as it alters the original design of the Craftsman Bungalow House. And so staff considers that the proposal does not meet the code criteria in that the window opening is not preserved, that changing the window pattern on the facade alters character defining features of a contributing building, and that the replacement of intact historic windows on the primary elevation is inappropriate as it compromises the historic integrity of the building. So with that, staff recommends that the Landmarks Board deny the application for the LAC to remove the 3 historic windows, modify the opening, and install 4 windows in the front dormer of the building at 2130 11th Street. And we have the findings on the screen if you'd like to reference those. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Do any board members have questions of Marcy at this point? I don't see or hear any. Marcy.
Oh, sorry, I have a question.
Sure, go.
Oh, I was just, so the dormer is, yeah, I'm just trying to see, but so the structure is the same, it's just the window openings that will be
Correct.
different?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
And Marcy, before we go to the applicant presentation, would you be kind enough to go back to slide 116, just because it refreshes my memory of the changes that have already been approved, and to look at this more. Okay, there's the left is existing, right is proposed. Okay, that helps me, because I know there have been a lot of things already approved and moving forward. So I wanted to get context.
Sure, and this slide has more detail with both the east and the west elevations, but I'm happy to go through the overall changes here. And I think maybe the point here is that historic buildings change, they continue to change, and our review is really how it changes over time. And so the LDRC found that the vast majority of the proposal did meet the design guidelines and was something that was approved, but that changing a character defining feature right on the front of the house didn't meet the design guidelines. And since the LDRC doesn't deny applications, they can either approve it or refer it up to the full board. That brings us to the full board's consideration in this hearing this evening.
Well, and the other thing that's unique is that with John's recusal and 3 board members present, that it takes 3 board members to move forward on any motion. Unanimous, correct?
Yes, and Chris Reynolds from the City Attorney's Office is here to help us navigate if we get into a situation
Yeah.
where the board doesn't have 3 votes to make, to take action.
Okay, thank you for that reminder. No, this just helped me. I just wanted to, I know I've seen this. I'm excited about things that have already been approved. So now we'd like to invite the applicant for their 10 minutes. And I don't know if it's both Kate and Carrie speaking.
I believe Kate is going to present and Aubrey is promoting you. There we go. Hi, Kate. Welcome.
And Kate, once you can hear me, and you're welcome to turn on your camera, I will need to swear you in, and you can state your full name for the record before your 10 minutes commences, okay?
Yes, and I am Kate Leggett from ESA Architects.
Carrie Whitman.
Hi, welcome, ladies. And then both of you, I'd like you to raise your hands and swear to tell the board the full truth. And you may
Swear
have
to tell the full truth.
Swear.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Want to start?
Sure, and I don't, if Aubrey or Claire, I don't know who might, thank you. So you just heard from Marcy on the 2130 11th Street project. If you can go to the next slide, please. Overall, Marcy has given a great account of where the property is, what the project entails. I think we can probably, these are renderings, just site plan locations. Next slide, please. Similar, these are the elevations that we had submitted as part of the dormer only change. Also, Abby showing those previously approved, just in a different orientation. We are here presenting for, as Marcy had outlined, the change to the windows. As outlined in your report, this project has gone through, currently it's on its 5th year of moving through the process, trying to come up with a solution for this location, which is actually in the RH2 zone district for zoning, separate from your historic look at it. But in general, this building itself does not meet, it is a non-conforming use on multiple levels in its location for its size, its parking, its orientation, setbacks. It does not meet barely any of these requirements, and we will be moving forward with the zoning process next. As part of that, and we have looked, and Carrie, previous to my involvement, has looked at this dormer, trying to find a way to accommodate the zoning, the building requirements, as Marcy has outlined, to separate these 2 units with that fire separation wall, and provide a space that is functional and provides a nice living arrangement. So one of those pieces, and there are in this presentation in some of these next slides, there were other options that were looked at for the dormer, and we received the feedback regarding how important the dormer was, have backed up. We have kept the dormer.
Same size, yeah.
Same size. It will have the same trim work. We will leave all of the detailing. We will be reusing or replicating the trim.
The windows.
And then the windows, where this orientation comes in with changing it to 4, has to do with the usable space behind it. That allows the fire separation wall. It does have to jog inside, but it can come in between the 4 windows. So right in the center, allowing the spaces behind it to have a more functional space. Because as you see, the dormer, because of the pitch, the tallest, most usable space is in the center. So making sure we have that usable, this dormer can be as functional as possible.
Next, and really just also for suggestions, we just don't know what to do. Go ahead.
If you go to the next slide, please. And that's in this plan, you can kind of see the spaces where someone would be standing, the shower, the toilet, the vanities are all in the center, which is at the top of the gable of that dormer where people have the most amount of space. They'll be able to utilize, look out the windows, and just trying to make it functional. Next slide. So these are just a few examples of other dormers in the Mapleton Hill area that were, going. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying we're bigger. Go ahead.
Yeah, just had some other ways that they were arranged on different types of houses around Boulder. Also having the craftsman detailing at just a different type, like the center picture allowing for 4 windows. The roof does have a shed element to it. Just trying to find a way to try different options. And if we go to the next slide, we can look at a couple of these other options that Harry had looked at in this process as well. So on these next alternative dormer options, we had
stuck.
Yeah, essentially we've gotten to a point where we have tried to do a limited change. We're really trying to limit what we're doing, keep as much integrity as we can, understanding that the 4 windows instead of 3 helps with the functionality here. So if on the next 5 slides, you're going to see some of the other multiple options that have been looked at that have not been presented. We're just trying to find a solution, and we really appreciate the board's time in taking a look at this and your consideration and your feedback as to what might be the best direction as it applies to what you are looking at in consideration of this being a restricted area, non-conforming already, not only from Landmark's perspective, but from the other portions of the planning and building department we're going to have to go through. So
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. So these other options were just things that we threw out there. And again, I like the dormer. I like the way the dormer is. I just don't know how to lay out a duplex like this. So if not, then I have to go all the way back and redesign everything. So that I'm just here for advice, suggestions. I don't know what else to do. I appreciate all the stuff that has been approved. It's super exciting and I love it. But I just don't know what else to do. And as far as the windows go, I love the windows. I'm happy to keep the windows, but the windows are in such bad shape. I have no choice other than to make them look exactly the same, but do new windows. Some of the ones on the bottom floor are in good shape, so those will be kept. But those dormer windows are very, very, very bad.
And do you want to talk about some of these other dormer options?
Yeah, I was just trying to figure out a way. I just put it in AutoCAD and just tried to figure out a way that we could put that firewall in the middle. And I, went all over Mapleton Hill and, went kind of crazy. So I just decided, okay, well, let's try 2 on one side and 2 on the other. And then there's room for the firewall and it still looks good. That one does change the size a little bit on the right. So you can go to the next one. Next slide. Oh, there you are. Sorry. Yeah, then I said, okay, well, let's try 2 since I'm turning it into a duplex. I was literally just throwing paint on the wall to see what would stick, take the continuation of the original dormer, add another dormer, center it over the bottom windows. I think it lays out really nice, especially for a duplex. Again, these are just solutions. I don't have like a problem with the dormer. I just don't know how to make it work. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Is that the same one? Yeah, Windows is same. Yeah. So that was pretty much it. I think one of them was a little bit bigger. Oh, we had the shed too. Yeah. And then after seeing the place on, I think it's on Spruce and 8th, the one that was in the middle of the pictures, I saw that there was a shed roof there with 4 windows. So then that inspired me to throw this in there. I just don't know how else to make the firewall work. So I'm really just here for suggestions. Otherwise, I have to redesign everything and come up with something else. Go ahead.
There's one more.
Oh yeah. And then that one was same kind of idea. Also, the view is really good there. So I'm like, well, I'll just throw it against the wall, see if it sticks. I love that each side gets a beautiful view of the Flatirons. But this was also another larger shed roof, just another idea. I know it's, yeah, that's.
It's
Go
just
ahead.
different, just trying
It's
something
just-
else.
Yeah, we just don't know what else to do. We both are putting our heads against the wall going, what are we gonna do? Is that the last one?
Next, there's one last slide. So in conclude that, sorry,
That's
that,
it. Oh, no,
the-
there's the one.
go back one, please. Yeah. We just are trying, Carrie is looking to, oh, sorry, just the list. Yes. Wants to proceed to provide these necessary updates, the TLC that this house needs, especially at this point. In conjunction with the restrictions on the RH2 zoning that are in place, meeting the building code for that fire separation wall, and trying to find the middle ground between all three of these pieces, the landmarks, the zoning, and the building requirements. And we appreciate your time and your consideration of this, and would really also appreciate any and all feedback.
Yes, suggestions.
Great, thank you. And ladies, I need to tell you, you just came in beautifully at 10 minutes according to my little timer at home. So well done. And I think you know this, Carrie, that we also come back to applicants with an additional 3 minutes as well as any questions from board members. So our next step is public participation. But prior to that, I want to see if Ronnie or Chelsea has any questions for either of you right now. I'm not, Ronnie, no? Okay,
None for me.
okay. Thank you. And I don't think Chelsea has any at this point either. So we will move on to public participation for this agenda item. And Aubrey, for the last time this evening, do you see anyone who's raised their hand or anyone on the phone who has pressed *9 to speak to this?
We do have one hand raised. It is Fran Mendel Sheets. So just give me one moment.
Hi again.
Fran, you know what I'm going to ask you to start off with?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Fran, be sure you swear yourself in one
Oh,
last
yes.
time this evening. Thank you.
I swear to tell the truth, nothing but the truth. And my name is Fran Mandel Sheets. It seems to Historic Boulder that the LDRC and board have been remarkably flexible with the changes that have been approved on this highly intact house in a really important district. Therefore, the proposed changes, we felt do not really meet the design guideline standards. And I will say, just as a side, that all windows can be rehabbed. Historic Boulder agrees with staff comment recommendations that this is not compatible with the city's standards, and in denying this application for all the reasons that are listed in the packet. And that's it in a nutshell. Thanks a lot, you guys.
Thank you, Fran. And Aubrey, I'll give you a moment to see if there are additional people wishing to speak to this.
All right, I don't see any other hands raised. If anyone in the virtual audience would like to speak, please raise your hand. All right, I think we're okay to move on.
Thank you, Aubrey. We will close public participation for agenda item 5C. And then Carrie and Kate, you do have an additional 3 minutes if there's anything you'd like to add before we bring it back to board deliberations.
I guess I just would love any suggestion from any board members. We've just really kind of, I just don't know what to do as far as if we're gonna turn this. I don't know how to put a firewall in between those two units and give more space and more housing. So the main thing I want is just suggestions. I appreciate everything that's been approved, but this house is, not very intact, contrary to what Aubrey just said. It is Fran, sorry, no. It just is not very intact at all. It's a big, big, big project. It has never been maintained. It is a mess. And I am more than happy to, people consent. I've had James Hewitt gave me like 3 different window people that came over to look at this. And I think I submitted that back a long time ago. And the upstairs dormer windows, they said there's no way they can do them. They are a mess. So I'm happy to use them. If they can do them, it's great, So that's just kind of where I'm at. I just kind of don't know what to do. If not, I've got to go back and redesign. And I've got, as you guys know, other projects going on. And do I just let it sit there and figure it out? I don't know. So I would love any type of communication from any suggestions. You have anything else to say? No, that's it, really. I'm under my 3 minutes.
Okay. Well, thank you, ladies, and we might come back to you with questions in a moment. So now, and there are 3 of us considering this, Ronnie, Chelsea, and myself. I don't know if Ronnie or Chelsea would like to kick it off this evening.
Can I just, before we get started,
Sure.
Can we just hear very briefly about what happens if we don't all agree?
Great question. Thank you.
So to take any sort of action, you need unanimity here because you need three votes for either denial or approval. So
what does that mean?
I would advise trying to come to a unanimous decision, because if you
So
can't, if you can't, then we probably have to redo this with additional board members.
So Chris, and sorry to interrupt you, Chelsea. Chris, I mean, we'll see where we are with a board decision. Is this a hearing that could be continued? I don't think I've ever been
We would
involved.
probably need to redo the hearing, because if
Okay.
we brought additional board members in, they would need to be presented with evidence.
Okay. Right, because they weren't at this one. Thank you. So Chelsea,
you.
does that answer your initial question?
Yeah. I just, I thought it'd be helpful to know that before we get into it.
Yeah. And I don't know if anyone wants to jump in.
Sure, I can jump in. Carrie and Kate, Carrie, you've been at this for a long time, and I really respect your tenacity and your ability to endure a process that is complicated. I think you have a great project on your hands. So I would hate to see you give it up. I want you to give it up. You're doing a good job. You're going to have something that is really wonderful. I know that every time you've come to these meetings, you've been very open and willing to hear, and I compliment you for that as well. So this is unfortunately pretty clear for me that it's not allowed. I wouldn't agree to be able to put the 4 windows in the front of this for all the reasons that staff included in the report, and the history and consistency of the application of those guidelines. And I know that you are trying to solve this too. And so I'd be up for talking a little bit about solutions and trying to understand the problem in a little bit in greater detail. And I feel like we should do that if there's time and opportunity to. But I agree with staff's recommendation. And maybe before we maybe before I go into some problem solving mode, we should hear from Abby and Chelsea.
Thank you, Ronnie. Chelsea?
Well, I actually don't agree with Ronnie. I look at this proposal and the original building, and it reminds me of those children's magazines where you're asked to see the differences between the two. Like, to me, the difference, it evokes, the main structural elements are exactly the same. And I do not think that it detracts from the historic significance of the home to have that fourth window. I think if you showed a lot of other photos of nearby homes that have those dormers, they have 4 windows. I don't think anyone will notice. I don't think it detracts from the significance. And I also know that when we talk about the guidelines, it says in the guidelines, like, this is not meant to be a checklist. And so I think that's why we have a board. If it was just a checklist, then we wouldn't need as a board to be here reviewing this application. And I think this is one of those situations where we're taking one gargantuan house and making it into 2 that provides more housing and more, in theory, more affordable housing since they're smaller units. And to me, having 4 windows in the same dormer as opposed to 3 just doesn't detract from the significance of the home. So I will not be supporting the staff recommendation. I think it should be approved.
Thank you, Chelsea. And, I do appreciate the photos of the other homes that some had 4 windows in their dormer, but I don't know if that was originally there, if it's an evolution of a house, if what historically was there. So, I think that I am in alignment with Ronnie and will be supporting staff's recommendation. And one of the most compelling things to me, on one hand, it seems simple. Yeah, why can't we just do that? I think that it comes down to the details. And I think that what's most compelling to me is that on the first floor, there are 2 sets of windows, triplets. There's 3. So it's like introducing a whole new element, whereas if there were like maybe 2 sets of windows on each side of the front door or whatever, and I know that Ronnie, as an architect, may already have a couple of creative things. I understand why you want to do it, and I think it makes sense. It sounds like you want 2-story duplexes versus, 1 duplex on each level. And my best guess would be to take advantage of our fabulous mountain views. I also know there are some people where living on 1 level is very appealing too, but I will be supporting staff's recommendation. Again, I can't speak to the other great examples you showed us because I don't know if that was always there historically or modifications over a home's life. So it looks like Ronnie might be ready to say something. And then, of course, we will give Kurt a chance to share his thoughts.
Sure. Okay, I guess I just one thing again about the applicant. I think, Carrie, you guys do a great job with compatible design.
Thank you.
Like, you could design a new building in the historic district and check and just do it right. Like, I'm confident based on what I see here. Like, you can do a great compatible design building. And so the options that you were showing on the front elevation, that's like a dormer, an enlarged dormer, a shed dormer, a pair of dormers, and then also the sourcing of information, which is what do dormers look like in the area and how do dormers interact with major gables? What's their knee wall height? What's the pitch? Like, you guys are doing that, and even presenting tonight, like, there's dormers out there with 4 windows in it, and I'm sure there's dormers out there with 1 window in it. But that's not really, well, first of all, that's a compliment. And
Oh,
then
thank you.
second, it's also a little bit of like not what we're doing right now. And I know that you know that, but I'm just
Mhm.
saying it because I think that the references are really good, but if you start with the biggest principle of the building, it's about the massing, and the massing for this building is its roof forms, and then the things that are happening below it, which is this like heavier base and the porch elements and the columns, and then it's the detailing of that. But if you look just specifically at the roof form, you would say the most character defining piece of this roof form after like the major gable is that dormer. And I know you know that too, because you're like, we're not going to change the dormer. After those elements, we talk about the openings in the building. And the most perceived opening in the building is this triple window. And so it's like kind of like hierarchically the most recognizable window. You're proposing something that is very compatible. And I agree with Chelsea, it's not like necessarily going to ruin the building, but it is the most character defining window in the building. There might be other windows on secondary elevations or tertiary elevations, as we've done with you, that are more easy to change. But this is like the primary window. So I think if we were to, if I could be of help, it would be to talk about design solutions that might keep the windows where they are, because I think that's what you're hearing from staff. And I think that that is very consistent with the way in which we have applied, the interpretation of these guidelines. The other thing is housing. Yay, more housing. People need housing, small houses. There's the guts to the building. And yes, this isn't a debate about whether or not 2 units is the right thing, or 4 units is the right thing, or 1 big unit is the right thing, right? Like that's not what this is about. And so I think the design components related to your goals are something that we can talk about, and I'd be willing to look at that a little bit. And I don't know if there's room to do it, but there's like just some obvious questions about space making and the fire rating complexity and whether or not it's doable to keep the 3 windows, because I think it might be, and I don't think it's a total revamp. I would hope it's not. But those are my thoughts on some of the topics that have come up.
Thanks, Ronnie. I'm going to look to Kurt to see if he'd like to add anything.
Sure. It sounds like there's a split on the board, so I probably won't get into those details, but it's not clear to me why the firewall can't just, why the center window can't just be closed off on the inside, and then the firewall goes up to that. So it would no longer be, it would appear the same from the outside. It would no longer be a window, but that would be where I would suggest at least looking into. So that's all I have to add.
Thank you. Thank you, Kurt. So Ronnie, were you thinking of taking a few minutes to share some ideas? Or have you even gotten to a place to say like how we could?
Sure. I mean, we could talk about it if everybody thinks that's an appropriate thing. I mean, we'd have to pull the plan up and take a look, and then I could ask some questions, because I think it's a plan-driven question. Okay, so the overall width of the bay is 15'4". Is that correct?
Is what the overall width is 15'4".
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
how wide, I mean, I think that this is a plan-driven question, right? Like, is there a bathroom solution if the bathrooms stay here, in which you can get a demising wall to jog, because your current demising wall is jogging, and hit one of the structural members between existing windows. That's kind of like the primary thing. I'm sure you guys have looked at this. Why
Yeah.
doesn't that work?
It comes right into the middle of the window. Can I just say one thing, Ronnie, real quick? Sorry, so basically, I'm gonna keep one of these and sell one of these, right? If
Okay.
I've spoken to every realtor from Tim Goodacre, who I went to high school with, to Bill Goodacre, to Digger, to everybody. And for the amount of money that I have to put into this building to get it in a good place, because it is not in a good place. They all are saying to at least get, some of my money back for the, $2 million I'm gonna have to spend. Economically, the 3 floors is a better sale. I'm keeping one and I'm selling one. And that's where I'm having a hard time. I've laid it out on 1 floor, 2 floors, 3 floors. I've laid it out on 1 floor on the bottom. We have them here. And 2 on the top, doing 2 units like that. And economically, I don't know that it would make sense. And we have done, sorry to not answer your question, is there, we tried to jog it over, and then also Kurt, like, can you just put it up right into the window? But on the outside, I don't know how that's going to look good. If the dormer is supposed to be a amazing element, you're going to look up and 2 are going to have light going through and the middle one's going to be dark. Which I think as a designer, I don't think that would look good. I also want the aesthetics of the outside to look good. I don't want, to see a wall in front of a window, or one is blacked out, or, I just think it's gonna look weird. So what did you want to jump in real quick?
What would you, I mean, what is your opinion on that? If one of the windows had a solid wall behind it, visually, is that an acceptable solution for Landmark?
Oh gosh, I mean, that would not. We should talk to staff a little bit about that. That's not the solution I would pursue, even as the owner of the building, because you already have limited windows. So to like cover a window, and then there's a fire rating question. You'd have to literally build a wall so that you could fire rate, I'm assuming, the interior face of that wall, and then bring it out to the point of the termination of fire rating. So it wouldn't be what I would suggest you do. But let me ask the question. Why can't you lay the bathrooms out with the windows in their current location? We're not talking about, reconfiguring all the floors. We're just saying leave the windows where they are and let the fire rated wall terminate into one of the structural members in between windows. Because you almost have 15 and a half feet on the exterior, right? A typical bathtub, or shower or whatever, but bathtub is a 5-foot dimension. And I know you're doing something that's more luxury, so I'm not suggesting you use the minimum. But it seems like even if you kept the tub in front of a window, that you might have room for that. We'd have to see it.
And Ronnie, and what we were looking at with that, and this kind of comes back to the discussion about the dormer pitch itself.
Oh, that's right.
So we can't jog to the right any further because of the entry door on the floor below this sits almost right where that toilet is. So and the door cannot be moved. You guys have already said that
We
door.
tried moving the door before with you guys.
It has to stay. So that means the demising wall can't jog to the right. It would have to jog to the left. And as we go, if you can picture going, call it a foot, maybe 14 to 16 inches past the center line where we are currently, if we're trying to get in the middle of have 2 windows on the right and 1 window on the left, the slope of the roof is creating a space that I don't know how we would use it. If you picture standing under it, the floor level and where the pitch of the roof is coming in, you're going to get to that point where you're standing
Like this.
with your head against the pitch of the roof. So it becomes a less usable space. It probably wouldn't be best for a shower. We
Mhm.
wouldn't want to put a sink on the outside wall. So that's where the struggle came in, is how do you utilize it in
Mhm.
as a bathroom when you're essentially pinching it into the pitch of the roof and the short short edge wall of the dormer.
Right.
It-
Can
it-
you, I mean, I know that we're getting into the details on this, but can you, sorry, hold on, my screen went blank here.
And
Can
Ronnie, while
you,
you're ask your question, and then I want to look to Marcy and Chris to see if this is appropriate to continue this conversation a little further, or if we're veering into something that, with three of us weighing in on something and a potential another hearing, I just want advice from either of you when and where you feel it's appropriate.
Yeah, thanks. So, I think if there's a kind of a quick factual question to ask applicants during deliberations, that is okay, because we want the board to make decisions based off of good information. But from my perspective, what's happening here are the applicants are basically like participating in the deliberations, and it's more of a back and forth conversation and a brainstorming session, which isn't really appropriate for deliberations. Like how big is this? That's one thing. Whereas like let's have a exchange of ideas. That's more of participating in deliberation. So I'd say the board is kind of in not great legal territory right now in terms of complying with the rules. The board deliberations should be amongst board members and not really anyone else.
But it's okay for a factual question. I just, right, because it did start feeling to me, which is what I love about LDRC and the collaborative nature. I just wanted guidance on that. Ronnie, does that help you with, I know you had another question or suggestion.
I mean, it doesn't help me very much, but in the sense that I'm going to start asking the questions like this. You see that orange arrow? How big is this?
That seems factual.
Yeah, that's what I'm going for.
Proportionally, it could be, if the whole thing is 16 feet across, call it 3.5, 4.5, maybe. And then the structure of the roof, is down with the insulation for the roof. So it kind of comes off the corner of the window. But again, I don't want to get into
it
what
does?
it doesn't
It
want
cuts-
us to get into.
Well, are you saying the ceiling cuts off the corner of this window?
No, it doesn't cut off the window, but it's just above it because it has the roof insulation.
So it's very proximal to the window itself.
I think it's up just slightly. I don't have the measurements in front of me, Ronnie. Sorry.
Okay. Well, I think I don't know if I have other. Can you go to the plan for a second? I want you to be successful. Hopefully,
Thank
it's
you.
okay for me to say that.
Thank you.
And so I would like for us to have a solution that you could go away with and feel great about. I'm not sure how the vote is going to play out because I have kind of heard from the straw poll that it sounds like two of us agree with staff, and one of us does not. So there's something that might continue to happen here. I still believe in staff's recommendation, and I'm very hopeful about what I see here, and that I believe you could find a solution that meets your objective and still complies with preservation's goals without redoing all of your project. It's just, I think it would require running through a handful of plan option scenarios. And Kate, I know that you're capable of doing all that. Like clearly you've put this building plan together. It just, I think it might require a little bit of thought and additional thought and creativity and perhaps redesigning the layout of the bathrooms. So Yeah, I would love to give you more information, but if, you've heard already that we've kind of gone
Yeah.
a little further than we normally do.
Yeah, I know, and that's the challenge because we love when we can have the dialogue, but I know it's not appropriate when we're in our deliberations, and it feels kind of like we're truncating everything. But we also have to abide by the meeting rules and procedures. So go ahead, Chelsea.
Oh, so just in terms of the options for them, I feel terrible that they've been through so many processes around this project, and I'm really disappointed that this can't find a way to be approved. But would it, if they were to withdraw, because they basically, what I predict is that the likelihood, because John is recused, it would, even if Renee supported the project, it would still be a 2-2 vote. And so I'm wondering, to save everyone time, if it makes more sense to withdraw this. I don't know if you can withdraw just this element of the project, because I feel like that would make more sense from a time efficiency standpoint than to bring it back with one other person, and then the best case scenario, it's 2-2. So I just want to discuss potential options before we move forward.
That's a great question. And Chris can correct me and or Marcy about if they, and this is, I think, the last thing they have with the major rehabilitation of this property. If they can withdraw, I think I've got to just be very honest at this point. I think this could be the maybe third board that has looked at this dormer and changing the windows or changing the dormer. So I don't know what the path would be coming back again with this, with the 4 windows. It would give them time to maybe explore the interior layout. But as this has transpired over 5-6 years now, I know other boards have also turned this down.
But the rest of the project is approved.
Right. I'd say 90%. Oh, Carrie, I'm terrible at math, but I think 90% of the requests have been approved at the LDRC. So I'm really going to have Chris and Marcy help with this because not only are there just 3 of us right now hearing this, but I also know this has been presented maybe in slightly different iterations, but before, some current board members, some former board members, and maybe, I don't know if it ever was before a group where none of us was on the board, but Marcy, am I making sense what I'm trying to articulate?
I believe so, but I missed if you had a question in there for me at this
I
point.
don't, I think I want your, Chris, what I'd like to know if there is a recommendation to withdraw and what that really means.
So
based on the fact it's been here before.
Yeah, so the rest of the project has a landmark alteration certificate that's issued. So this isn't holding up, the rest of the project. And so in terms of offering the chance to withdraw, that means the applicant could reapply for a similar proposal in the future, in the next year. If, and it sounds like that's one option. It doesn't sound like there's a vote with 3 or a motion with 3 votes this evening to take action. So I think the other option would be continuing the hearing until the 4th member is back. But to Chelsea's point, that could still be a split vote without action. So Chris, you might step in and add anything.
Yeah, there is the option to ask the mayor to appoint a former board member for that hearing so that we wouldn't necessarily have a tie.
So there'd be 5 board members
Mhm.
with John's recusal. And that actually, I have been to a Landmarks board meeting eons ago where a former Landmarks board member did attend and did vote.
Yeah. If I were the applicant, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I think withdrawing this at this point would probably be your best, and trying to figure out how to, it sounds like these 3 windows are very important. So I think withdrawing and trying to come back with a way to preserve those windows is your most efficient and like best use of your time to make this happen. That would be my recommendation.
Right, because without having a motion and taking a vote, the consensus seems to be there'd be 2 who would support staff's recommendation and 1 person that wouldn't. So no, we couldn't take any action either way. So Marcy and Chris, does that make sense?
Does it make sense? I mean,
To give the applicants an opportunity to withdraw.
that is part of the board's historical practice. So I'm not gonna. It's
Okay.
what the applicants do
Yep.
is completely up to them.
So let me just jump in because I think they're talking about it. I think we're giving the applicants an opportunity to withdraw, and I'm sure that they're talking about that and trying to figure out if that's the smart thing to do. If they choose not to withdraw, do we have to put a vote, and do we have to prove that we don't have a quorum?
I would recommend somebody making a motion for approval or denial, and then taking a vote. And then if the magic number of 3 is not reached, then I would recommend somebody making a motion to continue the hearing until we can have an additional board members.
Okay.
Do we offer them an opportunity to withdraw first, or at what point do we offer that?
The applicants can choose to withdraw at any time
Okay.
prior to the board taking action, which would be reaching that number of 3.
Right.
Are we required to make the vote in order to request a continuance?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Are we required to take the vote in order to, have the continuance?
I mean, that would just be the cleanest way.
Because it would demonstrate the reason.
Yeah. Just to move to continue the hearing for the so that we can have at least 1 additional board member, perhaps 2.
Okay. Are we done with discussions, or should we offer them the opportunity to withdraw?
I think we offered it already, so.
Okay.
I think they've heard us.
Yeah, I don't know. Do I have to make that decision right now?
No.
Yeah.
Because we can move forward with the continuance, and you can withdraw at any time.
Okay.
So it's kind of a little consequence as far as I understand. So I would like to make a motion. Chris, is that cool?
You can make any motion at any time that you want, but I would, before moving to continue, I would recommend voting on the staff proposed motion. Just so that we can demonstrate that we don't have any sort of the number 3. Yeah.
That's my motion. I move that the Landmarks Board adopt the staff memorandum dated July 10th, 2024 as the findings, and deny the application for a landmark alteration certificate to remove 3 historic windows modify the opening and install 4 windows in the front dormer of the building at 2130 11th Street, a contributing property in the Mapleton Hill Historic District pursuant to section 91118 of the Boulder Revised Code 1981, as shown on plans received May 13th, 2024, finding that the proposal does not meet the standards for issuance of a landmark alteration certificate in chapter 91118 BRC 1981 and is generally inconsistent with the Mapleton Hill Historic Guidelines and the general design guidelines for, you guys, your faces are all in the way.
Oh.
Boulder's Historic District and individual landmarks. Got it.
I second that. So on a motion by Ronnie, seconded by me, we'll take a roll call vote. Chelsea?
No.
Ronnie?
Aye, or yes.
And I vote aye, so the motion is fails because it's 2-1.
And then I will move to continue the hearing. Chris, is there anything else that I need to describe in that motion?
I would say I would move, my recommended motion be, I move to continue the hearing to the next regularly scheduled Landmarks Board meeting.
I move to continue the meeting to the next regularly scheduled Landmarks Board meeting.
I second that. We'll take a roll call vote. Chelsea?
Wait, what if I don't vote yes?
You don't, oh. Oh my goodness.
I was just genuinely curious what happened.
Then that motion fails and no action is taken tonight is my understanding, Chris.
Well, we are in the middle of a motion right now, so.
But if Chelsea
there's the cleanest way to do something, and then there's other ways of doing something. So if the board didn't move to continue the hearing, I think the hearing would actually be continued because it hasn't been closed. And so it's going to be open until the next Landmarks Board hearing, regardless of whether or not there's a formal motion that's approved by our Landmarks Board members. But the reason why I'm recommending and advising that the board move to continue it is that is the cleanest way forward. Otherwise, I think it continues by a operation of law.
Chelsea, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. I'm just deciding.
Okay.
What I want to do. I just don't, with only 4 board members, I think the outcome would be that the applicants withdraw. And so I guess I don't see the point.
Well, why are you making that assumption?
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't be supporting it. If Renee doesn't support it, it's tied. If she does support it, the project is denied and the applicants would withdraw.
But that's the process. I mean,
No, I know.
making a
So I'm
guess
just
it would've-
saying, yeah. So I'm just trying to save us all time, but I guess I'm not. So
Well, I think it's significant that it's continued by a matter of law regardless.
yeah, that's why. Yeah. So
It's
sure.
a matter of if we want to make it clean or not.
Okay. Sure. Yes.
So I'm going to restate the motion on the table, which I think I put on the table, but I can't remember. Okay. So on a motion by Ronnie, seconded by me, we would continue this hearing till the next regularly scheduled Landmarks Board meeting on I know it's August 7th. We'll take the roll call vote. Chelsea?
Aye.
Ronnie?
Aye.
And I vote aye. So the motion passes unanimously to continue this. And this is the part, Kate and Carrie, where we give the person who gave the presentation on staff to tell you what the next steps are. So Marcy, good luck.
All right, well, we will see you back here at the next Landmarks Board meeting, which indeed is on August 7th. And we'll be in touch in the meantime in case there's any additional information about the process, since this is unusual but not unprecedented.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, ladies.
Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Bye. And I know
Bye.
someone was going to reach out to John so he can rejoin for matters.
Yes, Aubrey's going to give him a call, and I'll pull up the slides here.
And just as we're waiting for John, I just want to make the point and advise Landmarks Board members, this hearing is still continuing, so don't discuss it with anyone, because that would be an improper ex parte contact that would then need to be disclosed at the next hearing. So the next time any Landmarks Board member should substantively engage in that application should be at the next hearing and not outside of that at all.
And thank you for helping navigate this, because and we didn't know till right before the meeting that Renee was not able to connect virtually to this. So it made it a little unique, but Chris, thank you so much for navigating this.
You're welcome.
And while we wait for John, Chris, when Abby asked if I thought what you said was helpful and I said no, I was kidding. And I don't know you well enough probably to say that, but I didn't know.
I didn't even register that you were making a joke, but it's totally fine.
For the record, that was a joke. Yeah, no, it's very helpful, and I think very interesting to think on those aspects of what we're doing here.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful that you help lead us through that, because I think it's you're doing a very tactful job, and I think it's the right balance of giving us a little bit of room, but not enough room to do something that might create a legal issue.
Well, and what I think I'm going to walk away with, Chris, it's more that when the applicants become part of the deliberations versus questions and answers. So the thing I think I learned is when it gets to more like, and we're so accustomed to it during LDRC, but it's when they did, when it crosses that line into them becoming more part of the deliberations when they're really not. So, hi, John. Yep. Wow. So with that being said, would John probably appreciate an update
on that? Why don't we do that now? Or is it just show up because Renee's going to hear about it? It feels like we move on, right?
Okay, we move on. Okay.
Yeah.
And Marcy, matters.
Okay, great. Okay, so here we go. Sharing my screen again is here. So, all right, you all can see this screen. So the first topic is the update on the Landmarks Design Review Committee proposed changes. So since our last meeting, we've been meeting with our colleagues at the code amendment team and scoping out this process, which has many, many little steps, but is something that we are taking forward. So you will see the process and the general direction in August under matters. And then you'll see it again in September for a public hearing. And the changes that are being considered about shifting what the DRC reviews versus what staff reviews, and then also extending the timelines for the initial review of applications and then how long the approvals are good for. Some of those are administrative rules that the Landmarks Board can adopt through a process. Some of those are code amendment, which needs to go to council. The code amendment team can fold in those code amendments into their work plan. And so they'll be on a parallel track, and then the timeline ones will continue on to council, whereas the administrative rule for what goes to LDRC would be in effect after your review. So I didn't finish this slide. There's 3 bullet points. So August, confirm direction. You'll see that as an item under matters. In September, we'll return with the full public hearing for both the administrative rule and the code amendment. And then after the public hearing, which is not intuitive, but it's the way rulemaking is done, after the public hearing is held, there's then a 15-day public comment period. 15 days from when it's posted in the newspaper, not from the day of the hearing. That means that we'll reach out to recent LDRC applicants. We'll put it in our PNDS newsletter. We'll try and get the word out so that people are aware of this change and provide comments. In October is the 3rd bullet here. That's when we'll bring all of the public comment that we heard back to the board, and then you all decide we want to change the rule that we just adopted, or it goes into effect, the next day. So that is a look at the process, and the wheels are turning. We've been working on kind of the groundwork phase of these changes. Any questions on that before I move to the next item?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I really, really appreciate all the work that's been done so far on this. I know I brought this up almost a year ago, and I think this is going to be a great improvement both for staff and for members of the board. And so I really appreciate all the work that has been put into this. And I think our future board members will be appreciative as well. And I guess I still just would love to keep it on the table to move the time of the meetings. I know that staff has made the determination that that's not feasible, but I just don't believe that that's the case. There's no other board meeting that requires this to happen during business hours. And if business hours were the most appropriate time to have board requirements, then all board meetings would happen during the business day instead of outside of the business day, which they currently are. And so if we're putting in all this effort to make this possible, I would hate for the ultimate goal of basically excluding a very large swath of people from participating in this board to not be met. And so I just want to bring that back up because we're like putting in a lot of time and effort. And my fear is that while it'll make things more efficient, it still does not accomplish the goal of having opportunities for everyone to participate. Or at least a lot more people to participate. Obviously, we can't, it's not possible for volunteer opportunities to be accommodating to everyone, but a vast majority of people are excluded by having this during the business day.
And I know Christopher Johnson is on the call as well if you want to chime in on this, but Chelsea, I do think that the changes that we're proposing fundamentally changes the Landmarks board members' commitment of the LDRC in terms of reducing the amount of time required for your volunteer board commitment. It also is fundamentally a program operation, and that happens within business hours. And if it is outside of business hours, it may be accessible to some community members. It then would be not accessible to other ones. So I do disagree with the point that it would be more inclusive changing the hours. And I would recommend that we revisit that single idea after these other changes are put in place and we understand what the new hourly commitment is for the board.
Yeah, I think that's right, Marcy. I don't really have a whole lot to add. I think you stated it well, and certainly we're open to continuing to explore how we can make those LDRC meetings as accessible as possible and reduce the burden on volunteer board members. And I do think that, allowing or creating these changes and allowing them to work for a while to better understand, the impact that that's going to have is going to be really helpful for us to make those decisions going forward as to what additional changes may or may not be necessary.
Okay. Well, I guess it does. I understand that some people can't attend volunteer opportunities in the evening, but I think the vast majority of people, at least people who are under the age of 40, who I've talked to, done a lot of outreach with a lot of people, this is not a workable schedule for that demographic, which is the majority of people living in our community. So I feel like it's dismissive to say that it's just as equal to have meetings during the day than it is after business hours. But I understand that's where the city is landing. One other idea is to only require one board member for every LDRC meeting, because then it would still be two people, the staff member and the landmarks board member, who only one of them has to agree, but it would reduce the number of meetings that each board member would have to attend.
I do want to echo Chelsea's appreciation to staff for looking at all of this, for exploring all sorts of alternatives and so forth. I do look forward. I mean, I haven't seen what everybody's coming up with, what goes through rulemaking versus code changes. So I applaud and appreciate staff doing this, and I look forward to seeing what some of those options are, because I think it sounds like just by the simple virtue of moving some things to staff review, that already is going to eliminate a lot of things that might appear on an LDRC agenda. And Christopher, when I started exploring from within Colorado to Los Angeles to St. Augustine to Charleston, South Carolina, I was struck how many of the monthly board meetings, not an LDRC things, how many communities and cities have their board meetings actually during a work day. Denver's Historic Commission meets, I don't know which Thursday of the month at 1:30. So, I mean, but it makes sense to me that the operational part of the program is during normal business hours, and that the board meetings, I applaud in Boulder, are after work hours, so more members of the public can participate, whether in person or virtually. So I look forward to seeing this. I know it's a lot of work, and I do appreciate and acknowledge all of that.
And, I do also just want to acknowledge that I feel like we've been fairly flexible in working with board members' schedules over the years, and minimized your commitment and in agreement with the board to 1 hour a week. And so I do feel like this should be a continued conversation about the board level commitment and what is doable, what's feasible for individual board members and board members as a whole as well. But I think there are incremental changes that provide quite a bit of flexibility and quite a bit of accessibility, that it's not this binary that I'm hearing, that either we're inclusive or we're not.
Very well stated, Marcy. Thank you.
What about the idea of only requiring one board member per LDRC?
Well, and I'll say it's 9:30 and I'm not feeling 100%. I truly believe that the Landmarks Design Review Committee is one of the best processes, not only in the city, but across historic preservation programs in the state and in the country. It is access to the decision makers on a weekly basis, one professional staff member, 2 volunteer board members appointed by the community city council to sit across a table, now a virtual table, to work out these design solutions. And having that dynamic, I think, has been incredibly successful over the last 50 years of this program. I think when you take away one board member and it becomes one staff member partnered with one board member, you're changing that, and for what? And so I think this is worth a larger conversation, but I think in these changes, and I'm open to these fundamental changes of what goes to staff and what goes to the LDRC, but I don't want to lose kind of the core benefit and value that I think, and I don't want to speak for your fellow board members, I think that that's where a lot of the enjoyment and fulfillment comes from, in being able to sit across the table from these homeowners and work out design solutions together.
Marcy, I just want to jump on that too, because as a board member, and when I used to attend monthly board meetings wearing a different hat, and very occasionally LDRC, for me as a Landmarks board member, LDRC is very rewarding. It's very educational. I learned so much. I always love when an architect's assigned with me, because I learned things I never knew. And I think it's just that connection with members of the community. I mean, we might hear from them at 3 minutes from a podium or through a Zoom call, but just sort of, having a longer conversation, the collaborative process. And I think what so many different people over the years, I can't say, I need to be careful to say many people have said, because if you ask me the number, it might be a dozen, which many sounds like way more than that. So here's the thing. So many people, a dozen or so people over the last almost 20 years I've been attending Landmarks board meetings, 18, have told me that they've gotten better projects and better homes and better solutions by participating in the LDRC.
Yeah, I just one quick add, I guess, to the discussion is the fact that I think one of the more successful aspects of the program is the fact that you do have 2 people, ideally 2 board members at each LDRC meeting, in which one of them is an architect. And I think that part of the power of the program is to have access to a design professional and a citizen review on the other side. I think it's a very balanced process, which does make it effective for people who are coming through the process, and it does yield better projects. And so it is something that it would change the dynamic if you had meetings at some alternation that were an architect in one case and a non-architect in another. It would just be a different dynamic that may not be as effective as what we have right now. And I'm not sure what the solution is yet.
Well, and I think that's why we will hear more in August, and then the public hearing in September. So it's hard to believe it's less than a month till we hear the more vetted ideas and suggestions and so forth.
Well, with that, I'll continue on. And the public comment at the beginning of the meeting about the event in the park, which was at the end of June, made me realize that I failed to send that information to the Landmarks board beforehand. So my deepest apologies. It is a series, and it includes a museum exhibit at the Museum of Boulder, but it's a very wide kind of effort across many organizations to kind of mark 100 years of Boulder Central Park and telling hundreds of years of stories. And so there was one talk already, or no, 2 talks already, one from Ava Hamilton, who's an Arapaho woman who spoke about kind of the history of Indigenous people in general in the Boulder Valley. I was able to attend that one. And then I believe Peter Pollock spoke about Olmsted and the community group responsible for the park's development in the 1920s. And so I do want to highlight these upcoming ones. July 17th, so I think that's next Wednesday, there's a talk on the history of the outdoor industry. A couple days later, Unheard Voices of Boulder, a community conversation. The displaced residents of Boulder's Central Park will be presented by our very own Claire Brandt. And then Leonard Siegel with Historic Boulder will present Central Park's architectural landmarks on July 30th, closing out that series. And then there is the museum exhibit itself, which runs, I think, all the way through August. But definitely swing by and don't miss it. And huge kudos to Claire, who put a tremendous amount of effort and helped kind of bring that all together. Claire, anything else you want to add about that event or any of the events?
No, to share widely amongst anybody who'd be interested in coming.
Great, thank you.
Wonderful.
So is
And
there-
that's
Is
all
that
we
it,
have.
Marcy?
That's it
Any-
for matters.
Okay, anything else from board members before we adjourn?
Yeah, I'm going to do
I-
a little self-promotion very quickly. I have 2 paintings in the library in the Canyon Gallery, which I think are worth going to see. The show is phenomenal. It's the Boulder Arts Association, and it's an extremely diverse and talent-rich show, and I'm very honored to have been included. So,
Oh, cool.
Definitely be
That's
going to see that.
Yeah. Thanks, John. Anything else? Ronnie?
Mine was small. It's kind of thing I always say. The events that you just talked about, Marcy, do we get calendar invites for those?
I will
And
send
if not,
you
can we?
calendar invites.
Okay, that's
I
awesome.
can do that. I can do that for you.
I think in general, if we have those types of things coming up, that would be great. Just to always just send that stuff out. And anyway, you've heard me
Yeah.
talk about it many times.
Happy to do that.
And actually, I had heard of the other 2. I was aware of both Peter and Ava's presentation, so. But it's nice to have, I'm excited about the 23rd for Claire.
Me too.
So is there anything else? Sorry, I'm trying to see what time. If there's nothing else from any board members or staff, the meeting is adjourned at 9:35 p.m.
Good night, everybody.
Bye,
Good
thank
night.
you.
Bye.
Marcy, I hope you feel better.
yeah, feel better, Marcy.
I could hear it